Good evening, everybody. Let's call to order the Board of Trustees work session for September 16th, 2024. Do we have any changes that we want to make to the agenda, or otherwise we'll just go in the order the agenda is published? Item number 1 is discussion of the pool improvements and our tours for other pool facilities and tennis courts.
Other items, just we can bring up a few things at the end, or do you want to
Oh, well, we can talk about it now. Just
put them on the agenda?
Sure. Yeah, you want to talk about it now?
I just wanted to kind of get an update on, there are a number of properties I know we're struggling with getting cleaned up or that have holes that are still there. We've got foundation of an original town that's been sitting, wide open next to our residents for a long time. Just wanted to get an update on kind of what we're doing about it, whether there's anything we could or should be doing any more of. Since we're just starting to get complaints about it. Some of them are safety related and others are visual related.
So these are all just Marshall Fire cleanup items?
Yeah.
Anything else we want to add? All right. So let's start off our discussion on the pool improvements and the tours of other pool facilities. Matt, you want to kick off?
Yeah, Leslie's, well, first her staff has set up tours. Those calendar invites went out to the board. I think everybody's just going to meet at the location.
Yeah, just meet on location. So we have one, the 19th, the 20th, and the 24th. I told them, wait, give us a break, and then we can do some more if we want to.
So that'll be good to go out and see other facilities. So the pools are both the north and south pool, over 20 years old. They need some major improvements, and just from a maintenance, but also capital, new items.
Hold on 1 second. Is the other tour the 24th or the 27th?
I think it's the 24th.
All right, because for some reason I have a invite for Friday the 27th in Golden.
Yeah.
That's when we
Let me
have.
double check that.
Because if it's the 24th, I can make it. If the 27th, I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a splash water park?
Yeah.
Are we like attending the splash water park, or we just?
You are correct. It is on
Walking
the
it.
27th.
It's the 27th? Okay. All right, so we've got tours on the 19th, the 20th, and the 27th.
I'll verify that with you, but I have it on my calendar both days.
Okay.
It's just rather confusing. But,
Currently for the north and south pool, any improvements, major and significant improvements are outside the 5-year budget. We're expecting both pools to exceed $8 million when they do get done, if funds become available. But if we do have the funds available, we will start with the north pool, and that's why we included information about the north pool for the discussion tonight, but we can also talk about the south pool as well.
yes, and that's correct. We are experiencing more and more maintenance and downtime with the pools due to repairs that are needed. In the memo, I mentioned that we have several things that are pending at North Pool. We do have some patching of the actual pool shell that needs to be done, replastering. The skimmer baskets, we did a short-term fix on those last year, but it was a 1 to 3 year expected lifetime of that repair, so those are going to need some work fairly soon. And we believe that our sand filter is spitting sand and into the pool, and probably need to replace that filter medium, as well as make sure we don't have any broken laterals there. We have one pump that needs to be rebuilt. So the list keeps climbing on that facility. We did work with a consultant just to get some ideas of what you may want to do with North Pool moving forward and what that cost perspective might be. the group we worked with pretty much worked with the current footprint. So they did expand it, but not into the tennis court area. So they expanded it towards the street, which would lose some of that deck area there, but we gain it in some other areas. So they had 4 options. Option A being pretty much replacing what we have there and just making it ADA accessible, up to code, maybe improving some of the finishes, and then looking at adding a splash pad, and potentially, they called it a party room. It could be a classroom, party room, reservation space, guard room. So, and that came in at $3,382,980. So, and these are just looking at the components. The actual design and layout that they provided is not, I mean, we could rearrange that, but just looking at the different components, that would keep it with the 8 lanes that it has now.
Quick question, because I couldn't figure out, what are the lane widths right now? Because the memo mentions it taking up to 7.
It's a good question. I think they're more like 5 maybe.
Okay.
They're not quite as big as 7. 7's pretty generous.
Okay.
I mean, that's what you would see at a college
Standard, okay.
competition level.
Okay.
I don't, that would be luxurious. But it also,
A cushy lane.
it's a cushy lane, but it's a lane where when you have teams, you can circle swim or split lanes.
How about when the
People.
Flyers use it right now during practice? There's a ton of kids in each lane and they're going back and forth, so.
Yeah.
Well, they make it
They're
work.
tiny.
They make it work. I'm sure they wouldn't object to
The
a
kids are
wider
better
lane,
at
but
that.
what we have right now isn't that.
Okay. Okay.
Option B actually takes the actual pool circulation system and upgrades that to a gutter system, which is really more of a commercial grade pool. That's what you would see at the clubs and at most municipal pools versus the skimmer baskets. And then adding 2 lanes, bringing it up to a 10-lane pool, which of course all the competitive teams appreciate that. It makes their swim meets go a lot faster when they have more lanes. They don't have to do as many heats. So it also allows for more space when you're doing swim lessons to spread out. Looking at a 0 depth area instead of the splash pad, which is very popular component. It's kids like that when they're learning to swim, to ease into the water like a beach entry. But also upgrading our mechanical storage, sanitation, those things. All of these options do include winterizing the building. So that's maybe not spelled out in each one of these, but it does include that so that we could utilize the building year-round. We may not be able to use the pool year-round depending on what kind of heating system we put in. Cover system, or as an option D, the actual retractable roof and retractable wall system, which will make it fully usable year-round. Option C is just adding a few more things, so they go to the 7-foot wide lane. Pretty much has all the components that A and B does. They are looking at a breezeway for check-in, and more and more shade or more and more amenities, play amenities as we move further down. More shade, more play features. And option D is the covered system with all the improvements. It also includes a team locker room, which I think would be usable by the general public as well. So they did provide some diagrams on each of these pages. It might be a little confusing. They show the existing and then kind of the proposed on each page for option A, B, C, and D. And like I said, they don't have to be arranged exactly how they're arranged, but looking at utilizing that area under the canopy a little bit better, and actually giving the guards a a place to sit rather than out on the deck when they're not in the guard chair. It also includes some improvements to the kitchen area, which I know gets utilized a lot with the swim teams and with some of our reservations as well. So I kind of put some key elements down here that staff thought was important. Some of these may not be called out specifically in these designs, but I think that most of them can be incorporated in there. And looking at the price line for this, the option A is, again, just over almost 3.4 million, up to 13.5 million for the best of the best.
Did we look into what it would cost to just put a bubble on as opposed to putting like a actually like framed structure?
I know we have in the past, this group did not look at that. I think there was some feedback that they received that maybe the neighbors would like looking at a bubble, and some of the bubble structures are not as, they can collapse, I'll say that. So if you lose pressure, if you lose electricity, they will deflate and come down. So those are just the drawbacks on the bubbles, so.
I did send out this agenda item over to the Flyers Board just to get their kind of preliminary thoughts. They haven't met as a board to actually like really go through it, but they had a couple points that I just think that we should be mindful of. So they said one of the things was on the storage. So they currently use the storage that's on the east side of the pool. They use every square inch of the 180 square foot storage, and they would love additional storage. They definitely needed what they have, but they could easily double that and fill it up. They use that for all their starting blocks and heavy equipment that's difficult to move. So something that's easy to locate in that area is important. Interesting, they said, so like options B, C, and D all talked about a 10-lane lap pool. And they said that they want to think about this a little more. They said like that would definitely open up the program for additional practice, but they're not sure what the impact would be on meets. So it might not necessarily be necessary or advantageous for meets. Some of the pools that they swim and compete against are 8-lane pools, just like the North Pool, but some are smaller, but there aren't any that are bigger. One of the things that they also brought on was most of the families set up on like the grassy hill, kind of in between the North Pole and Indiana, and having like gate access from the west, so they don't have to kind of walk around and then in through the front. Like when it's other kids are swimming, they can just kind of walk right through. Even that, if that's just like a gate that is ordinarily kind of locked and closed, but it's just opened up for swim meets, might be something that would be appreciated during the design. And then they said if we could swap like the location of the men's and the women's restroom, they said that there's always like a line for the women's room during their meets and men's room not so much. And so if we can make a bigger women's room with an extra stall, that may be a good idea rather than making them the same size. But they'll do some additional thinking on the 10-lane lap pool.
And we did ask to design the building so that tennis folks could use the restrooms, so that is one of the components built in here as well. I forgot to mention.
And I know these are capital costs, but each one of them has a fundamental difference in terms of operating costs. Do we have the magnitude of the difference? And I get that today's operating costs are not relevant because we've got so many inefficiencies built in. But as we think about any of these, it's not just finding the cash to run it or to build it. It's how are we going to maintain it? Because that super expensive one, I cringe at what that may cost to run longer term.
And that's a very good point. I mean, obviously, if we extend the season, we would either need to look at some kind of arrangement and partnership with the teams where they're at least guarding for themselves, because finding guards in the off-season is extremely difficult. And that's pretty common, is to have that kind of an arrangement, but heating costs are huge. And then anytime you add anything fancy to a pool, whether it's a slide or a diving board or a climbing wall, it does impact the level of staffing. So some of those components require by state code to have extra staff. So there will be an operational impact if we extend or add, but we don't really have this did not provide any
Got it.
cost
Okay.
perspective on operations. I believe the 2021 PROS master plan, which is now
Old.
did provide some level of that, but I definitely need to research those numbers and get some fresh.
I don't know what our goal is tonight, but I agree, the operational costs are huge. The other thing that comes to mind for me is, what was built and was 20 years use appropriate? But now that we're sitting here, okay, we've got to spend $3, $6, $8, $10 million. How do we position ourselves to, well, I guess one, of each of these options, how long are they going to last? Like if you take A and B and either just add a couple lanes or you just keep the same structure, are we looking at 5 more years, 10 more years, 20 more years? I'd want to know that. And then from then if you can just redo it, is the quality that you're going to build to now, similar to the quality? I mean, are we going to get 20 years out of that, or can we? And then again with any of those options, what does the maintenance look like along the operating? What does the maintenance look like? Did we do it? Have we been doing a really good job of maintenance? I don't know. I haven't been here long. I haven't paid attention to the pools closely, so it would have to be your judgment. Have we done a great job of maintaining these pools, and we got 10 more years than we should have, or did we do a crappy job and we should have gotten 10 more years out of these pools? And then what does that look like?
I mean,
whatever the design is, and you don't have to answer it. I think
I can answer some of it. Typical life expectancy for a pool, for a municipal pool, not a neighborhood pool, not an HOA pool, is 20 years. I mean, we've stretched ours, and some other municipalities are able to stretch theirs. And have we done enough maintenance? We've done consistent maintenance. I do think we rely on contractors for a lot of our maintenance work. So not having an in-house, pool maintenance team, makes it a little bit more of a burden on staff to make sure we're on top of that. And sometimes we're at the mercy of the contractors, but that's,
so we've got
we're
some good
small,
life.
we're a small community, and that's how we operate. We are seeing that a lot of our vendors are, they're servicing a lot of other customers, and we are not always top on the list. So that's another fight that we have as well.
So we've gotten good life out of these pools.
I think
in your
we've
opinion.
got extremely,
20 good life. And then the
yes.
other piece I'd love to see as we go into this is, okay, we should know, we have to replace this in 20 years, and now we're sitting here going, well, the budget to replace these pools. It's been 20 years, we knew that we were probably gonna have to replace these pools in 20, 25 years, so, putting a plan in place that's at least watched, on an annual basis, that the boards can keep an eye on, that we have, okay, we need to put whatever it is, $300,000 a year or $500,000 a year has got to go into the pool replacement fund but I mean, it would just feel better in the budgeting, when we're looking at budgeting to go, oh, well, we've been putting money away for this. We knew this was coming, right? Let's, and yes, decisions might get made to use that money to fix the roads because we didn't have something else. I get that, but, seeing this information in the budget, so we're actually thinking about these things that we know are going to be coming at some point. That includes roads. We just haven't been talking about pools right now. But I'd love to see a little more effort towards being prepared the next time this comes up. So the next board isn't needing to do a sales tax increase to deal with some of the things that major capital projects we haven't get done. And I know that a lot of circumstances have gotten us here, but.
FEMA is sitting on $2 million of our CIP budget.
Right, yeah. So. Yeah.
We've got 30 years out of
Big
this,
ones,
right?
for sure.
So my thinking on this would be, did we ever think at 20 years in, are we going to replace these pools? Are we going to do something to severely change the maintenance structure? I mean, if we've just been like, you know, when you're younger, you got that crapper car and you're just trying every year, I gotta get another year out of this thing, I gotta get another year. You don't think about, okay, in 10 years, I'm gonna get rid of it, you just keep going until it dies. Is that the approach we've had so far with the pools? Just one more year, keep going, can we make it another year? Or have we, way back 20, 30 years ago, known 20 years was gonna be the lifespan of this pool, and we should start planning for that 20 years? Because we're at 30, and thank God we've gotten 30 years out of this, but we're asking for a tax increase in sales tax, but is there any way to maybe make this a little bit more à la carte, like the first option, for example, and then add the second options, gutters and sanitation, to make that pool better and make it run better and make it maybe less maintenance prone, so we can actually get away with a few more years?
I think
less
there's a
dollars?
lot of à la carte that we could, you know, mix and match what you think is important. There are some things that are gonna require that we replace the actual cool shell and probably a gutter system. We'd have to do a good bit of demo to get that functional, but it does provide a better level of sanitation and circulation.
On options A and B, where we're keeping the existing pool structure as opposed to the complete renovation, demo and new build. So my understanding with the North pools, we've had leaks, right? Like we lost, like, we were losing a lot of water and constantly having to
losing a lot
blow
of
up. So if we keep the shell, if we're keeping, and doing whatever we're doing to it, are we replacing the plumbing? Like, are we doing whatever needs to be done to make sure that, like, any of the existing problems are dealt with? Like, what I wouldn't want to do is spend $3 or $5 million and kind of fix it, but then kind of inherit some of the problems that we have already, right? Like, if we're going to spend any money, like, let's make sure that we're doing it right. I'm not suggesting that we need to necessarily demo and rebuild. I just want to make sure that, like, we're going to address all of the outstanding issues.
I mean, there would still be some testing that we'd have to do. I mean, they did this with the understanding that there's not major pipe breaks or other things. We'd have to do a pressure test on all the piping to make sure that we don't have leaks. We might have to do some repairs. We have to get into the decking to do some of those repairs. That's pretty common. We suspect we are losing quite a bit of water at North, which is why we have struggled keeping the chlorine levels where they need to be. But that's definitely one of the first tests that you would do.
I think that was sort of the, I wish we had $13 million. And first of all, we don't even know if the bond issue is going to pass. So for me, I think what would have helped was to know which are the things we have absolutely got to fix in this pool so that it continues to last us. If we do these things, what will it do? Because it's not clear to me whether we need to dump it, like Mark says, or whether we're trying to fix it. So for me, I think what it would have been more helpful, which would have been, these are the things we absolutely, positively have to do to this pool to make it last another 5 years or 10 years. So that sort of a la carte that Jason mentioned sort of makes sense to me, so that I then know incrementally, okay, what are the things we have to do? Is the have to do at 3.5 million? Then are we adding another 500,000? Because I want to be able to show the residents this is the way we're thinking. We're thinking about how do we make this really functional, and then these are things we have to do, and these are the things we want to do. Because if the bond issue passes, I don't think it's going to just be an issue of the 7 of us on the board making the decision how we would spend that 20 million. We're going to want to know from the community what are their priorities. I believe pools are going to be high on their priorities. I don't know that it'll be the same for roads, but I think it will. So, for me, that was the bigger pieces. I really wanted to understand which were the things that we had to have a good functional pool. And I do think we've got to make improvements to the bathrooms and things. So for me, it was helpful. It gave me a sense, but it didn't give me a sense of what are the have-to-haves and what are the want-to-haves. So I think if we could, do that a la carte thing, or these are things we absolutely have got to do. And they might add up to $5 million. I don't know.
The consultant seemed to think that the condition of the pool structure itself, the pool shell, was pretty good. But that's, looking at it visually, it's not doing soil tests and compaction tests and all
Looks
those
good.
things. So,
They know
You
about
know.
the hole.
and
They couldn't see it.
they're definitely, the plaster and, you know, the concrete below that has eroded in some places, so that definitely would need to be addressed. I think the mechanical circulation sanitation systems, not only are they've changed so much, that the new systems are much more efficient and effective, and I think those are the things that are gonna make a huge difference in the quality and the maintenance and the upkeep of those pools is making sure they're safe, we have clean water, and it's we're not fighting to keep it that way all the time, so.
So here's a question.
How much time is like each of these going to buy us? So really, any one of these things, how much time? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? As we look at this.
So, I mean, this is a philosophical question of north versus south. Like, if the bubble, sorry, if the envelope, because bubble gets confusing, if it's 3 to 13 million for the north pool and then X to Y for the south pool, what economies of scale could just do one and not the other? You know, like if we decide to just expand one of them, make it a larger aquatic center, and all our staff's in one spot, we cut down on the number of staff that we have to manage 2 different pools, and just, build up a single aquatic center that's, bigger and better than what it used to be. And that way we're not trying to, figure out, how to feed this animal and starve that one at the same time. Because I can't rationalize spending $5 million on one pool and 7 on the other when we could get, a screaming amazing aquatic center for 10 or 13 or whatever it is somewhere. I know there's a whole location question that needs to be answered, but I struggle given, that these things are both well past their useful life. If just, remove, replace both of them doesn't lose us some economies of just doing a bigger single entity.
I mean, there'd definitely be,
I think that they're different animals,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and, I mean, I think that that's a worthwhile conversation to have, to see like what could we get if we, pooled our resources. My thinking right now is, I think these numbers are, they're obviously very preliminary, and, we don't know the problems, and we don't know, once the consultant does the deep dive into, kind of fixing the existing problems, what is that actually gonna look like? But when I think about, I'm not assuming that anything's gonna pass in November, so like, but if we get, the bonding of $20 million, when I just think about like what all of that could be used for, I don't wanna blow, 60%, 65% of that proceeds on just the North Pool. So, my thinking is like 25% of the bond proceeds on the North Pool seems like kind of the max that I think makes sense. So like if we could spend, $3 to $5 million and fix the North Pool, and then have, 15 million to do South Pool and whatever else, roads, parks, playgrounds, whatever else we want to spend. Just kind of big picture, that makes sense to me. And if that means that like keeping, not touching the tennis courts, keeping the pool an 8-lane pool. It seems like the kiddie pool definitely needs to get reworked. And whether that gets converted into a splash pad or the pool kind of closer to Rock Creek Parkway, the zero entry, that makes sense. The building certainly needs to be rebuilt and modernized. We need more storage. I think we need more deck space. We need more shade over that deck space, and have various features like whether they're like misters or showers, stuff that people can kind of make the most of it. But I feel like it's in decent enough shape that kind of a full demo of the North Pool may be unnecessary, and I think like building a structure over it, I'd have to really see what the operating costs of like doing a year-round aquatic center. I think that's going to just blow our budget up completely. So I just
Unless we charge an admission fee. or
Yeah,
something.
right. You know, but I would like to, I'm interested in seeing like the YMCA in Lafayette where they have that bubble option, even though that there's a deflation
I would love to
threat.
know the stats on like that actually happening.
You know, just to kind of just see, like,
Are we-
how does that work?
Well,
And
how
see if
much,
that's-
what do we get out of the pool of, I mean, I just don't even have a sense, or we talk about a 5-year, kind of keep asking.
I mean, I
It's a
think-
5-year fixture, and a 20-year
Yeah, I think
fixture,
you
so
would
that's-
build it with the idea that the infrastructure would last for another 20 years. Now, that doesn't mean that every heater or pump or,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
there's still maintenance, we'll probably have to replaster somewhere in there. So there's incremental maintenance during that time, but a major renovation of this scale would not need to happen unless you wanted to significantly change the pool.
In the 3 to 5, million, in option A and B, we could
I think so.
keep the existing pool and get it structured, you know, solid enough to go another 20. Okay.
Whereas like, you know, the once we start talking about the south pool, I think that's a pool where like, if there's something where we want to kind of re-envision what it could be and kind of reconfigure it and turn it into something better, that might be more,
It's a little bit more room.
there's more space and, you know, I don't know, it seems like we can work with the North Pool and, you know, kind of build off of the things that are working.
Not to go in a completely far off direction, but to Neil's point and your philosophical argument, if Boulder Valley School District keeps going the way it is with enrollment, one of the schools may be on the block for closing. The Superior Elementary would make a fantastic rec center, and we would already have a tennis and aquatic center right next to it. You don't have to build a new building, retrofitting that could be $7 to $10 million for everything. I'm not pushing in that direction, I'm saying.
Just thinking outside the box.
Because everybody wants it, everybody wants a rec center, even though we don't have the money for it, so.
For the
Sorry.
time it takes to do, I mean, I understand there'd be various timing depending on the options, but is this like a seasonal, but like it wouldn't open for the whole year? Or are you thinking that stuff, these kinds of things could be done in, or is it a multi-year project? Like what are we,
The goal would be to get it done in off-season.
okay.
Maybe close it a little early, like in August,
Yeah.
so we can get some warm weather,
Yeah.
but that would be
The goal.
The goal. Got it.
I mean, for me, I'm leaning toward option A and to Bob's point, making sure that's gonna last, but, you know, if we're asking for a tax increase, I think we really need to be tightening the budget up. I don't think we can ask for a tax increase and then go nuts, so I wouldn't be in favor of anything beyond 25% for the pool. I agree that, you know, making one amazing one would be great, but at the same point with the Flyers, you know, having their meets, that closes down the pool frequently for the majority of the day, and if we only had one pool, that would probably be an issue for a lot of our residents, so I still think we have to have two. But I think just making it to where, you know, it's gonna last, because we don't want holes and everything else that's going on right now, making it sanitary. But we have, you know, over 30 million in other projects that, well, total projects, you know, 20 million in a tax increase. I think we need to be looking at how can we make those dollars stretch to try to accomplish as much as humanly possible. And obviously a project like this, if you don't do it through a tax increase, I don't know how you do it. But I think being reasonable and, you know, there's a lot of wants versus needs. And I would want to make sure that we're leaning more toward need and not want, since we have so many other things we need to pay for.
I think also like just the idea of, you know, the community already has two pools and like the idea of taking that away, you know.
It's not an easy
it's-
decision.
That wouldn't be, you know, it's kind of like taking away fence painting from people that are used to getting it.
Or Christmas lights.
It's not received well.
Are there any scenarios, Leslie, that, you know, an analysis comes back and says, oh crap, we didn't expect that, that's gonna be another $2 million to deal with this? I mean, you know, just, are there any, you know, oh my God, scenarios
I hope
in a pool?
not.
I don't know pools well enough, like.
I mean, it happens, sometimes there are unforeseens, but they would have to be pretty, I mean, that's big magnitude, and
Okay.
we haven't had major failing of the pool that would indicate that we have, you know,
You go, oh, we have to pull this out and redo it. because-
issues, right, yeah.
And fill it with concrete.
So what is the plan if the tax measure does not I mean, I know we're just gonna keep
Yeah.
on the maintenance cycle that we're on and
Well, yeah, I mean, we're gonna
crush
be able
through
to,
this.
of course, issue debt or anything, so
Yeah.
it's just keep them operational the best as we can.
With a hole in the one, are we getting to the point where we're gonna just have to be like, we can't maintain, like, we don't have the money to fix it? We can't continue to kick the can because there's holes, and we just shut it down until there's
Just
money.
Saddlebrook it, cement it up.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, are we getting to that point?
No.
If it's not safe to operate, we won't operate it.
Right.
We
Yeah.
can operate it safely.
we just have to make difficult decisions when it comes to the CIP, where, you know, maybe we don't do a road project every year. We use money we would have used for parks and pools and other things, free up $2 million or something like that.
Go yell at FEMA to get back our $2 million.
So, yeah.
One question as we bring this forward, you know, because we have stayed pretty steadfast in not charging an admittance fee or pool pass fee. I do want to understand, you know, just as we explore how do we maintain these things going forward or maybe pay for them, you know, how many unique visitors do we have? What's the competitive rate that the other cities are paying or charging their residents, both for the pool pass or daily use entry? And then we have to include that as part of our decision, whether we want to keep it free or, you know, as a pay use. What?
Built on nuclear.
Well, I agree. Back to what Mark said. I mean, it's hard to take things away or to increase fees for things, but I mean, this is the same thing, the conversation we're having later about trash in terms of if you give everybody a 96-gallon bin, but you only need a tiny little amount, you're effectively subsidizing everybody else. So the people who are using the pools are definitely benefiting from it. The ones that don't, you know, it's a question of what's the right number. Especially now that, you know, these pools were built, you know, when Superior was, you know, 8,000 people, now we're 15,000 people. What does the usage look like longer term?
Yeah, I have to support Neil. I really do think we need to look at this, because there are a lot of us that are happy to contribute to the pool because we think it's an important amenity, but we're also not putting any wear and tear on that pool because we don't use it. So I do think we ought to at least consider some sort of at least a moderate fee for the people who, you know, $5 pool pass or whatever it happens to be, because I'm not putting any wear and tear on that. So as far as I'm concerned, I put my share in, and to then have to pay more taxes related to it, it's a little bothersome. So I really do think we should look at some fees related to use of the pools.
Well, yeah, I think that's why it's important to understand the operational cost, you know, maybe the maintenance cost, what do we have to do in 20 years, what's that number look like? What's the revenue that comes in on it? I mean, it's close to dealing with it because that's the reality of municipal
It'll be $100 a day
services,
for you, Bob.
right, you know, it's, but, you know, for all of us, residents included, to understand, right? I mean, for us to deliver water to everybody in this town is far more than what you pay in your water bill, and I don't think residents understand that. I didn't until I started getting involved on the town board, right? What these things really cost and what the effort is, and why we're making, you know, why we have to make decisions about $300,000 here and $500,000 there. I mean, just, and you've talked about trying to get the budget in such a way that we can answer those questions relatively easily would be helpful. It just softens, you know, it helps everybody understand what we're doing and what we're up against, and whether or not we want to charge higher fees to use the pools or not, or whether we're like, you know what, that's a drop in the bucket, it doesn't matter, just keep it free, right? We might look at that and say it's not,
Yeah, I mean,
it's not worth getting $50,000 over 10 years in residence fees because it's an annoyance, right? But I'd love to be able to understand those numbers.
But I think it's fine to look at the numbers. I'm not going to support like a fee until I understand what we're trying to do. You know, because like there are a ton of amenities that we have in this community, right? We've got open space, we've got parks that, you know, we're all paying for out of our taxes, and you know, we keep them up and they look nice and they're really nice amenities here in the community, and those are the things that, you know, make Superior a great place to live, and people appreciate those things. So you know, part of it I look at it as like, you know, these are just aspects of our community. They need to have periodic investment to make sure that they're being, you know, adequately maintained, and you know, we're just dealing with some, just like our roads, right? Like they're at the end of their useful lives, and some of them need to get fully replaced. Sometimes you can get away with just a Band-Aid on it, but sometimes you need to bite the bullet and actually spend some more serious money on it to actually like fix it really well. So sounds like the general direction here is people aren't interested in doing something really significant. So like more like in the option A, option B range, to give kind of the consultants some general guidance on what we're looking to do to kind of preserve the footprint, see what our options are to extend the life of the pool, look into the mechanics and the plumbing and see what the condition of all that is, and then give us a better understanding of what sorts of options we have with an a la carte kind of mindset towards modifying the pool. I do think that the structure definitely needs work, and I think that it makes sense to make it open to the tennis courts so people can use the facilities and whatnot. So, just like we have the restrooms open at Community Park or Wildflower Park, have similar, availability for the public to go use those. And then, let's just do the due diligence with the research to see what we're seeing at other surrounding areas, and then we can use that not only for what we're going to be telling the contractor to do here, but then in the future that we do with the South Pool as well.
Yeah.
That work? And then let's continue to make sure that we talk to the flyers as well. So as we go in any direction, I want to just make sure that they're okay with the
And they've made
direction.
they've mentioned the storage thing several times, so we've got that one on our list.
I think it sounds like we got some great feedback. The one about the restrooms is a no-brainer, just as you think about usage.
Yeah. I was surprised when they said like 10 lanes may not actually be beneficial to them. I was like, oh, okay. I wouldn't think that. I think bigger is better, but it might not be.
Yeah.
Anything further on the pools for now? All right, then let's turn on to item 2, which is our discussion of the landscape fee.
So, in 2004, the town, after the voters approved the dissolution of districts 2 and 3, Superior Metropolitan Districts 2 and 3, implemented a landscape fee. And the fee was meant to cover the, I'll let Leslie talk about what it covers, but to cover all the services that the district boards were providing to the districts before they were dissolved. Districts 2 and 3 basically are the Rock Creek neighborhoods, with the Sagamore neighborhood as well. Everything south or north of Colton Road was District 2, and everything south of Colton Road was District 3. The town implemented the fee to help cover the cost of the services that were being provided by the districts before they were dissolved. At the same time, once the town took over districts 2 and 3, we lowered the property taxes for all those property owners that were in those districts. Leslie, you want to go over what was covered under the landscape fee?
Sure. The landscape fee covers the cost to maintain the grass. So whether that's in the parks, right-of-ways, all those areas, town properties, park amenities within the Class 1 landscape areas. And there was a map in your packet that showed what Class 1 was. I have a small one here, but it doesn't cover open space, and there are a few parcels that are Class 2, and then we have 3 and 5. So those areas are not covered. So it covers irrigation, water, electric. We do have some staff salary support in there. We used to have it cover the cost for some of our vehicles, so it used to feed into that. It does not anymore. And tree and plant maintenance were pulled out. Pond maintenance, the regular, testing and treating of the ponds is covered in the landscape fee, but not any major projects. So.
And in 2021, it was apparent to staff, as we were going through developing the budget, that the landscape fee wasn't going to be able to continue to cover all the expenses that Leslie described. So we started pulling some of those expenses out and have them paid by the general fund. Those included capital, fence painting, vehicles, anything else I'm forgetting? I think those are the primary ones.
Yeah.
Rather than increase the fee.
Rather than
Yeah.
increase the fee, correct. Yeah.
So in 2021, we pulled out fence painting and what else?
Any capital items, as well as vehicles, which would be capital. And we've continued that, and since 2021, the general fund covers all those costs. The Class 2 is covered by the general fund, which is some of the items I just mentioned. Class 3 is covered by the Superior McCaslin Interchange District, and then the Class 4 is open space fund, and then Class 5 is also the Superior McCaslin Interchange District. So some of, anything in those districts or open space would be covered by those funds.
Do we know how much it would, like, had in 2021 we not made that decision to not raise the landscape fee and to start paying for those items out of the general fund? Like, how much would the landscape fee have needed to be raised in 2021
Keep it.
to avoid pulling from the general fund?
That's a good question. I think Jeff, are you on Zoom?
Yes, I am.
You answer that.
Mayor, I'm not sure what that answer would be. You know, right now, every 1% increase is $20,000. So, you know, when we're talking fence painting, you know, of 120, you're talking a 6% raise. You know, we pulled a lot of the trees out, and I know those were, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that'd probably be another 5 to 6%. So I would say if we kept everything in, that year we probably would have seen a 10 to 15% increase, and probably would have had to, you know, instead of 4% increases, had, you know, 5 to 7 over the last 3 or 4 years, would be my guess.
Do you know why we did that?
Well, just as Jen mentioned, we're just trying to keep the fees low, or, I mean, no significant increases to
Yeah, I just don't recall, like, actually, like, really having that discussion about, like, kind of the strategy behind it. Neither here nor there. But
Yeah, I'd have to go, you know, we provide assumptions and changes we make to the budget every year to the board. I have to go back and look and see if we highlighted that or not, which we can do. Go back and see.
So I went back, because I couldn't remember what the landscape fees were, you know, until we just started increasing them. And basically, we didn't increase the landscape fees for 15 years. They were $25 from 2004 till when we made this increase. Do you have any sense of, because you can kind of look back at the old budgets and you can see things were being moved out every year because staff didn't have the money to do it, and they were only getting, so how much of this do you think is potentially that we got ourselves in a hole because we were not charging enough for the landscape fees? And we just sort of, in a discretionary basis, I don't think we made the right decisions, but we did. Instead of increasing the fee, we just kept taking stuff out of the, you know, what was sort of the commitment of what we would maintain in the town, which would be the sprinkler systems or whatever they might be. So have we actually hurt ourselves because we never increased the fee? Do you have that sense at all?
No, and Jeff can comment as well, but we also had a ending fund balance that was significant. I mean, it was enough to where we could spend down the ending fund balance every year until we got to that reserve line. And that was one way we were able to help pay for the increasing cost of the services we were providing. Jeff, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's it. You know, it's just, we've always talked about not, you know, raising fees any more than we have to. And that's kind of been, you know, the mantra, and try to do that as much as we can. And, you know, that's what the decisions were made back then.
And just in thinking about the timeline of when it was that was like COVID, right, for the fire. So we weren't as lean as we are now, clearly. And so some of these, I'm just saying that out loud so people, that there's not like over scrutiny of the why. Like if there was surplus, then there was space for it, and there was certainly no expectation of what was coming. And so, I just want to put that out on the table as well.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to blame or.
No,
yeah, I mean, you know,
I was initially like,
Yeah,
why did they do that?
I'm just
Like,
saying,
oh,
how much of it is we didn't think about it for
Yeah.
many, many years. We, you know,
There was a surplus.
And- you know, we moved things out rather than actually charging what we needed to charge to do the services. So we just had CIP covering what we didn't have in the landscape fund. So, you know, I just think there was some faulty thinking there, saying, oh, well, we don't want to increase fees. Well, we have had to now increase taxes because we've moved things out of the Class 1 landscape into CIP. So, you know, there's not an issue of blame, it's an issue of, okay, we have to take responsibility for where we are now and then fix it.
So just a question on numbers, right? So our fences, we were painting and maintaining them on a 4-year schedule. Is that right? So under the IGA is a 6-year schedule. What were we, like, we're allowed under the IGA to do every 4 to 6 years for maintenance, right? So we opted for 4. How much were we spending on maintaining the residence fences versus the town's fences in the last year or so? Like, what I'm trying to understand is, you know, we're on a 4-year aggressive cycle. Whatever that number is, we could have, you know, cut it in half by stretching it to 6 years.
The town fences represent most of section 3, so year 3, the rotation of year 3, so it's about a quarter of the cost. It's not as much linear feet, but it's the areas that are a little bit more labor intensive to paint, so it ends up being about the same as the other 4-year or the other 3 years. When we do that 4-year rotation, doesn't mean that we paint everything. We inspect that area and decide what needs to be painted or repaired. So even though it's on a 4-year rotation, we don't necessarily fully address all of that. Although painting, I don't know, since I've been here, it's needed painting by the 4th year rotation.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, because our beautiful lawns look the way they do, there's a lot of water that hits the fences. But I mean, what I'm trying to do is just wrap my head around, you know, how much are we spending, how much have we been spending on these fences? Because it's not in the budget anymore because it got moved to CIP. It's 120K is what we spent in 2021, 120K in 2022. Of that number, how much of that is on IGA related fences? Roughly a quarter? Is that?
Roughly a quarter, but not a quarter every year.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, it staggers, but like
Yeah,
if we're
but it's
saying,
about a quarter.
if we're to roughly say 40 to 50.
3/4 are in the IGA, 1/4 is the town.
Oh, I'm sorry, 3/4. Okay.
Yes.
So,
It's not an IGA, right? Dissolution agreement?
oh, you're right. That's a good point. That's a very good distinction. So
It says intergovernmental agreement and dissolution.
that's both.
But there's no governments.
It's an intergovernmental agreement to dissolve.
Yeah.
And the participants are the town in 2 and 3.
But-
So, yeah. The intergovernmental was between 2 and 3. And then
Which
the
don't
dissolution
exist
is
anymore, right?
Now the fact that it's all been absorbed into the town alone.
So there is no IGA. You're right. That terminology, that sort of
It is
dissolved when
Yeah,
it was dissolved.
yeah.
So just because I want to get my head around this. So we were spending about 90K per year on a 4-year basis to maintain the fences that were identified under the dissolution agreement. If we would say a 6-year cycle, but using today's dollars, that goes to 60K. So that's kind of what we're talking about here in terms of the future maintenance, which, out of $2 million that we pull in with the landscape fee, which we do need to talk about who pays it, who doesn't pay it. And the 60K is a relatively small amount, right? I mean, am I saying anything wrong?
Relative to the entire budget?
Relative to
Town, yes.
relative to the 2 million coming in for the class 1 landscape, 60K was a de minimis amount.
I agree.
Because we do have a conversation we need to have about, the landscape fee was set specifically to be paid by Sagamore and Rock Creek at the dissolution. And then the scope of what we do has gone dramatically, but the scope of who's paying it isn't kept pace. And I do think fundamentally we need to reassess who pays a fee, how much comes out of that fee. What is it called, a rate study?
Fee study.
Fee study. And what's the right number?
Because if we, I'm going to continue to say I'm not comfortable with the way we made this decision on the fence painting, because we made all these decisions in work sessions, but it's been done. However, we're hearing from our residents, we're not happy with what you did, but if it's $80,000, and we took that $80,000 and we divided it among the 51% of the people who have fences, it's going to be about $4.65 a month. It's pocket change for the residents, but it's a big deal for us. So, I know we're talking about the landscape fee, but it sounds like, from talking to the attorney, that we can charge a variable fee. And we could charge it to the 51% is the number of residents who share fences. And so all I did was I took the $80,000, that's roughly the difference between what last year's number was and this year's number. I divided it I took the 2,804 people who are in Rock Creek, got 51% of it, and it comes out to about $4.65 a month. I would wager you that those residents would be happy to pay that $4.65 a month. However, we have a bigger issue in this landscape fund, is these fences are falling apart. And so what do we do about this issue of, these are 25-year-old fences, and do we need to have a bigger discussion about, we got an email from the one of the fence committee people talking about, for the Rock Creek HOA, about these fences and what are we going to do going forward. So I don't think this is just an issue of the landscape fee. I really think we have to talk about what do these fences mean to our community in general. So my immediate solution is we need to just make sure that in the 2025 budget, we increase the fees for the people who have fences. I don't know if we can do it. The lawyer would have to tell me. But
We would have to.
I am a strong advocate that we have done the wrong thing by taking this out of the
So
budget.
in a sense, Mark would pay the extra fee, but I wouldn't.
Because you don't have a fence.
I don't have a common area.
And I won't pay it because I don't have a common area. I don't have a fence that backs up to open.
And
I'm paying for them now.
But you,
I want to pay that.
So, I just,
We did have a resident though recently, and I don't know if it was the First Fridays or where it was, but when they were arguing that we should continue to paint the fences, said that they would be happy to obviously pay to have it done because they trust us to do it more than the HOA, and we've gotten a few emails to that effect. But they said that they would argue that all of Rock Creek benefits from that because all of Rock Creek is using the trails, using the parks. Everybody's passing by those fences. So regardless of whether or not it's your fence or not, you are benefiting from not having them look shoddy. So looking at that, and if you divided it by, it was the 10%, and I looked at what the different fees were, it's $350 for a single family, $295 for an attached, and then $236 for an apartment, which to your point seems like pocket change. I'm pretty sure everybody would be in favor of that, so.
everybody in town benefits from the fences in Rock Creek because we all walk the trails. So if you're going to make that argument, then we should be fixing them. But the immediate concern we have right now is the people who we're now saying have to maintain the fences. They're not going to be able to do it for $171, roughly, when I did the math, for $171 a year. Even if they amortize it over 4 years, they're not going to be able to do it for $600. That's my guess, But I think we've made a mistake, you guys. in taking this out of the budget. I don't think we thought through it. I don't think we thought seriously, we didn't look seriously at what was committed in the dissolution agreement. If we say it's okay to drop fences, what's to stop us in the exact same paragraph? It talks about maintenance of irrigation systems. Okay, do we think we don't want to do that anymore? I mean, basically, we've now opened the door that we could stop doing all these other things. And I think we owe it to the community. You know, me, I hate those 6-foot fences. I think they make us look like some sort of a, you know, we're all trapped in. But the folks who have those fences like them, and they have had somebody maintain them for 22 years.
I would argue that I think we did discuss it at length and advertised it, and I don't think it was a decision that we made, you know, on the fly and didn't really.
I'm not saying we made it on the fly. I'm saying we made the decision in a work session.
I'll speak for myself. I did not have this dissolution agreement in front of me when we made that decision,
Yeah,
unfortunately. And
but
I
then
think that
we saw
was,
subsequent to that,
We
we
did.
discussed it, and the way it's written, at least to me, seems like it's talking about town fences in true open space and parks and not necessarily private fences. Now, we've seen the residents are reading that a different way. It is very ambiguous, so I can see where there's confusion. I think, fine, if everybody wants us to maintain it, and it would be uniform, there's obviously economies of scale, it's gonna be cheaper if we continue to do it, but we do need that money to come from somewhere. It hasn't come from the landscaping fee for a while. So, and like I've said multiple times over these meetings, I don't think all of Superior should be paying for Rock Creek. I think Rock Creek should be paying for Rock Creek. And even if it's just Rock Creek, it's not that much. So just start increasing the Rock Creek fee, depending on the fee schedule that we were given, and move forward with doing it uniformly with us in charge of it so that it gets done correctly.
And I'm more comfortable with that approach too. I mean, the HOA requires those fences. I mean, that's part of the agreement. The types of fences, the color of the fence, the type of paving fence that you have to have that fence, right? Those are requirements that the residents signed on to when they signed their HOA agreement, right? And to put that burden across other parts of the community that I struggle with that. I don't, you know, if there is going to be a fee associated, because being an original town, we don't have any fee, but there are some services that we get. We start talking about other areas that are getting a landscape fee. Residents are going to need to understand what they're for. And Rock Creek knows what they're for. They've been in place for 20-some years, and they haven't been risen, and maybe they should go up. That's part of what I think we're talking about today. Beyond that, I think we have a bigger discussion about what landscape fees cover and for which areas. But I would agree with Trustee Miller. I think not having this in front of us, you know, yes, I know there are ways in here that we could not be responsible for this, but the reality is this is what was agreed to, and it's, you know, the money's not that much.
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Long. Sorry about that. I mean, good job.
I'm good.
Because, I mean, okay, let's be fair and honest about this. What does the HOA really do that we don't already do? We do snow removal, we do landscaping, we do irrigation, we're eventually be doing trash collection. What is the real purpose here? I mean, eventually the HOA is going to be obsolete, right?
No, they tell you to paint your house.
We can do that. Or we can create design guidelines. That's why we decide. No, I'm not saying we should, I'm saying this is.
No, but there's covenants in place that say, like, this is what the neighborhood needs to look like. So
And they
the
manage
HOA board says, hey, your lawn looks terrible, you need to mow it. Hey, you've got to paint your house. It's, you know, peeling. That's what the HOA does. It maintains.
No, I know what the HOA does. I'm just saying, to Stephanie's point, this is a really good thing, because the next step is going to be the HOAs to keep stepping back from their responsibilities. There has to be some accountability on both sides of it. Yeah, we didn't exactly do, you know, maybe it could be argued we did the right thing or not, but, you know, this is the best way forward for us, because a lot of communities just get rid of their HOAs after a while. Like Sagamore used to have an HOA.
no, Sagamore never had
Never
it.
did.
Never had?
Yeah.
They had a design.
They just had a
It's a
PD,
plan.
PD, okay.
just a PD.
The two areas that came up when we were discussing this that we haven't talked about yet, though, like I like the fee change that creates equity for those that are getting the benefit and doesn't charge those not. But we talked about private property concerns and we talked about staffing. And so how do those get addressed in adjusting the fees?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's to Sandy's point, you know, you said like what's to prevent the town from, you know, not maintaining the irrigation. You know, in my mind, the difference is the irrigation's on town property and the town owns it, so the town maintains it. These fences are on private property, the town doesn't own those fences. You know, you can knock down your fence tomorrow and the town doesn't care at all if you ever rebuild that fence. The HOA might, and they'll say, hey, you need to have a fence here to comply with the covenants, but the town doesn't care. So, you know, that's the difference between, you know, it being private property versus, you know, the public property improvements, and, you know, that dissolution agreement. You know, I still think it's very unclear kind of what the dividing line is between what the landscape fee is going to pay for and what the general fund is going to pay for. My general opinion is I think that the landscape fee should be self-sufficient in all respects and not subsidized a penny by the general fund. And if that means that at the end of the calendar year, we've collected more sales tax than we budgeted for, or more property tax, we could always do a refund to the taxpayers, or you could do additional capital, you know, improvement projects, but the landscape fee should be self-sufficient. So, and so, for example, like the holiday lights, right, that we've been paying for out of our general fund, you know, that to me seems like it should be something that's funded out of landscape fee. If it's, you know, they're Rock Creek holiday lights, okay, there's some portion of the landscape fee that pays for that, and maybe there's some similar, you know, amount of the landscape fee that is assessed to original town for holiday light down Coal Creek Drive and downtown Superior, and all of that. That seems like it's a better way to make this going.
I have a question. So some of those items that were removed outside of the fencing, if the fencing is going to be put back in, like, is the point of this to revert to the original contract, and all the things that were in the contract that were agreed upon the town to cover, those now get factored into whatever the landscape fee is going to be to cover? Because we absorbed some of those things and put them.
I think we should. I think
All
we
of
should
it
look at
needs
it.
to go back.
Yeah,
not
I
just
think we
the
should look
fence.
at it.
Like,
Because we took out tree plants and shrub enhancements. you know.
why? I mean, I mean, I don't want to cherry pick the fence like that, like it's contractual or it's not. Otherwise, we're doing this thing where we have things that are ambiguous and then 10 years down the road, somebody's like, why are you doing it this way? So it needs to be,
The pools.
All-
Well, I mean, the pools are in the decision
they're in the
agreement too.
agreement.
And, you know, we're not funding the pools out of the landscape fee.
That'd be the end of it.
why we should fix that.
Well, I don't think the pools were, because if you, the dissolution agreement, so there's the map, and speaking to, you know, the sophistication of the dissolution agreement, I think the tract map has actually been colored in by a crayon or a marker. So that's kind of what we're dealing with this agreement. But you do have to remember there's class 1 tracks, class 2 tracks, and class 3 tracks. I think the pools are,
In the class.
they're in
They are
2 or
not-
3, yeah.
They were not in the Exhibit E level of service.
That's what I thought, yeah. So.
Pools were not there. It was continue repairs and placements of irrigation, continue annual planting of flower beds, continue correction of drainage problems, continue replacement of trees, repair and place hardscape, concrete paths, parking lots, soft trails, playground equipment, signage, and other improvements.
Well, it's
Monitor
in the-
condition of
it's in the
open
rec
space
service.
perimeter.
Yeah, the rec
fencing.
services, the first one's the pools.
Yeah.
You know. But, I mean, I do agree with what Trustee Kellish is saying. We should be looking at this, because why are we paying for this out of the capital improvements budget if it really is something that was agreed as part of the landscape fee? I didn't go through and dig through it. I only looked at that one, the level of service piece out of Exhibit E. And it did include irrigation systems and monitor condition of open space perimeter fencing, wood and metal, and perform repairs as needed, continue restaining and repairing metal fencing on a wood and repairing metal fencing on a 4 to 6 years.
But it also talks about street maintenance and pools.
So, you know, but that's what I'm
Well,
saying
the HOA
is,
said they own the streets when they signed the trash contract.
Yeah, it looks like the pools in, what is that, that's community.
Just,
Community park, I think those are.
so
that's a class.
however we're gonna do this, the point is, we made a decision, and as Neil said, none of us had the agreement in front of us, and when we went back, there was reconsiderations, but the residents were clear, they're like, this is the contract, this is my expectation of what you're gonna do. And then we pulled things out of that, and so, like, if we're gonna fix this, we need to fix it correctly. We need to fix it the right way, and if it means adjusting things so that the pools aren't in it, and that, like, we need to fix this so down the line, 10 years from now, or 10 boards from now, someone's not going, what in the hell were they doing? Like, what did they decide to do in this, like, this here and that there, but none of it matches the contract? Because that's where we're sitting at right now.
Well, I think the only way to do that, honestly, is to send it to the voters in a future election to say, do you want to fund the landscape fee in perpetuity to cover the Rock Creek fences?
Well,
And then ask the voters to do it, because otherwise, like, we can go back tonight and say, like, let's go fix the fence situation and start funding it again. And then 2 years from now, a different board decides, you know what, we don't want to do that anymore. And we'll be right back where we were. So, I mean, that's the only way to actually, like, fix it for real and make it permanent.
But doing that,
but we should
because it
really-
goes to all the voters, since we don't have, districts or.
Wouldn't it just go to the?
No, I mean, so we
Wouldn't
get.
it be paid by all of Superior when we're talking about, it's not equitable because it's really a benefit to Rock Creek residents, not necessarily all Superior residents. So is there a way to put it on the ballot to say, hey, Rock Creek, do you want to pay for your fences?
But let me ask a question.
I don't know.
If you look at let me just ask a quick clarifying question of Leslie. When you look at the Class 1 landscape budget, there is a line item called landscape existing. It's budgeted to be 1.12 million in 2025. Does that include the landscaping in the entire town? So in other words, does it take care of Founder's Park? Does it, or
Take
is that
Superior Commons, like, this is where I'm just trying to go, like, Superior Commons, the big huge park across the street, is now out of the landscape fund.
Yeah, but
That's even-
that's a different line item right now. I am asking in the landscape existing maintenance at 1.125 million, does that include the landscaping that we would do, for example, at Founder's Park? Does that include the contract with Vargas?
Founders is out of SMID.
Is what?
Founders is paid for out of SMID.
Okay, so I'm just asking what's in that, because we know downtown Superior is going to be in there eventually. Right now, it's a separate line item, but it will all be mushed together. Jeff said that for the first year, when he pulls in those new things, he lists them out separate. So we can see downtown streetscape is 25,000, South Streetscape is 25,000. But next year, tell me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure this is what Jeff said. Next year, those 4 downtown line items will all roll into the line item for landscape existing. So exactly, does that not include, is that only Rock Creek? Or is it Rock Creek and Calmonte or Lanterns
Yeah.
or any of the other areas that we would work on?
It
Any landscaping in Sagamore?
Yes, it includes other areas.
Okay,
Yep.
but it would not include Founder's Park?
No, because that's paid, as was mentioned, out of SMID.
Okay, that's my mistake, so,
That's the one that's not paid for.
but that may be the only one.
Yeah.
So, for example, we need to be, we haven't pulled that out because that's $1.1 million out of the $2 million we get there. But what we've been doing is moving stuff out because we don't have enough money. So we're really not being fair to our residents by telling them, this is what these services that we promised you are costing. All we're doing is pulling them out and we're putting them in another budget. So we really should be doing an evaluation of what did we commit to do in that agreement? And I don't know, I haven't looked at it carefully, and really explain to the residents, hey folks, we moved the fences out of here because we couldn't afford it out of the landscape fee anymore. So now the rest of the town is paying for that out of the CIP budget. So, we really need to tell the residents exactly, and if we go to a ballot issue and say, okay, here's what we include in this landscape fee from now on, and we're gonna base it on what it costs to do it. So, I'm very frustrated right now, because I think we did not know what we did not know when we said to take this $80,000 out of the budget. We now know. I feel like we've broken our word on something that we've done for 20 years. And it doesn't benefit me one little bit, because I live in the summit at Rock Creek, and I have to pay to have my fences fixed. So I'm not arguing this because it benefits me. I'm arguing it because I think it's the right thing.
So I'm gonna ask this question, not because I'm trying to be like a smart ass or a jerk or anything, but when do we stop paying this? The year 3000? Is this in perpetuity, like until
They're
the
all
sun
gonna
consumes the earth? Like,
Upgraded.
right now,
Who's
like
gonna pay for
they're, people say, well, we've done this for 25 years or whatever. But like, unless there's actually like something from kind of the voters that, formalizes it, this just ends up being, a policy call for a board to make at a particular point in time. And we might make that decision, right now or in the next month or so, to say, let's go back and go back to kind of the status quo. But, 50 years from now, are we still doing this? 100 years from now?
I don't know. I think you're right in that we need to ask the voters, but we got to tell them what it's going to cost, because it may be they say, oh my gosh, it's going to cost all this money. We don't want you painting the fences. We'll let them fall down. But we're not telling them, we're not really telling them what any of this stuff costs, because we just keep moving it into another fund and pay for it.
And the problem is like with this, I agree that there needs to be better communication, better education of ownership, of kind of rights and responsibilities and all that. But, as these things age, we're already getting, I'm sure we all got these same emails that said like, well, the town should just replace some multi-metal fences after the Marshall fire. And it's just like, okay, well, that would be $10 million or whatever it would be.
Lucky.
And those aren't even our fences, right? Those are fences that are on people's private property, so you'd have to like get access to and so there's this misconception as to like what we can and cannot do. And that was one of the reasons why I think staff, brought this to the board's attention. Is just like, look, we can keep doing what we've been doing, but we've got this problem that we're maintaining property that we don't own.
How do HOAs typically handle a capital improvement like that?
They don't have.
They get dues for it. They have like a separate special assessment that they pay for, the people pay for to do
District
that.
doesn't have it, yeah.
And you better hope to God you got special assessment insurance on your homeowners, or you're paying a pretty penny for it.
Yeah. But, to me, like when the time comes for the replacement, that it should not be the town's responsibility to upgrade that capital improvement for the HOA.
They're gonna ask.
Yeah, well.
People will expect it. People will say, well, the town's been painting it, it must be the town.
That's why,
Well,
I
and
think that was part of why we were like, we need to stop doing this.
That's exactly.
Because
No, and that's exactly right. After the Marshall fire, everyone kept putting something in Click to Fix, like repair my fence, it burned down, or, when's the town gonna build it, because you guys got all this insurance money from these fences that burned down. Like, well, we never owned the fences, so there's no insurance money. And I think that did, now that I think about it, that was part of the conversation, right? Like, post-fire,
who's this? Like,
none of this ever belonged to the town. Like, it was never insured to us. But I want to circle back to a couple of things. One, I do think we need to go to the voters ultimately, but I also think we need to figure out, going back to what I said earlier, we need a base level landscape fee that everyone is paying, because everyone benefits from the open space, the parks, the amenities. I don't know what that number is, but, there's amenities across town that the landscape fund has been consistently paying for. The playground, the community park. People use community park throughout town. People use this big park over here is going to be coming out of the landscape fund going forward. What that number is, I don't know. That's like the base fee, and then after that, maybe there's an incremental Rock Creek fee. Is there, is it a two-tier Rock Creek fee, a base Rock Creek fee, and a Rock Creek fence fee? I don't know. I don't know that I really feel comfortable that I should be subsidizing the painting of your fence. If that's what the Rock Creek as a whole would like to make that decision, that's on them, and I'll happily pay it. But the town inherited this agreement, yes, this town, I mean, if this town merged into another town, this agreement would be null and void. Like these agreements don't just live on in a perpetuity. At some point, you have to re-up with the community to sort of see, like, is this what the community still wants? To your point, Mark, how far does this go?
For the record, I don't want you to pay for my fence to be painted.
But I mean,
I'm happy to pay for my own fence. I think to Mark's point, I understand why it was done and now we're at where we're at, but I feel like the landscape fee, we need to assess everything that should be included in that, and then we need that to be self-sufficient. Anything above that for Rock Creek, great, have Rock Creek or specific homeowners pay an additional fee. But, now we're looking at a ballot measure to increase sales tax to cover all these CIP projects that we can't fund, whereas we've been pulling money out of the general fund, CIP, to cover things that really a fee should have been covering, but we just didn't want to increase fees. I mean, the reality is, stuff goes up. I mean, there's inflation and everything else, and it's been great to keep fees the same, but then you get this confusion where residents are upset because we can't continue to pay because it's coming out of the wrong bucket, and we realize that and we need to address it. It should be a self-sustaining fee, and Rock Creek, either individual homeowners or Rock Creek in general, because everybody's walking by those fences, needs to pay for their own fences.
So what I would like to see us kind of consider at a board meeting to actually kind of make a decision is, let's look holistically at the budget. Everything that the landscape fee should be paying for that it currently isn't. What would we need to actually collect through a landscape fee to pay for X, right? Like mowing and park maintenance and all that stuff. Then what on top of that would reinstituting painting of Rock Creek fences cost just on Rock Creek? Option A, everybody pays for it. Option B, just the homeowners that are actually getting their fences painted. And then in that as well, in the, what is the landscape fee going to look like to cover all of the non-Rock Creek fence items? But Cold Creek Crossing is not currently paying a landscape fee, and what is original town's not. So what is appropriate? Like, what services are provided in those neighborhoods that are appropriate for them to be paying? And then, if we were making it equitable for all, you're getting the benefit of Superior Commons just like I am, right? What is a kind of a base level fee that's appropriate for all portions in town?
Are we permitted to just impose a new fee, or does that have to go to voters or what?
Go to the voters, and that way there's no question. Oh, but I'm sorry, that's for the incremental piece.
Yeah, I think the voters piece is probably more of a political question than a legal question. Legally, you can impose a fee as the board without going to the voters, as long as the fees benefit is greater than the fees burden. And actually, Trustee Howard's point, one thing I wanted to bring up for you guys to look at, in the agreement that was agreed to, that's been referenced many times by many different people, it says on page 6, it's 3.1.1 B2, landscape maintenance fee, about 3/4 of the way down the paragraph. It says the landscape maintenance fee will about $30 per month. However, the landscape maintenance fee may be increased or decreased based upon a rate study to be completed and presented for consideration by the town at a public hearing prior to any increase or decrease becoming effective. In the landscape maintenance fee shall be set at a rate directly related to the reasonable cost of such maintenance and the need to maintain sufficient reserves for operation and maintenance purposes. So, by the terms of the agreement, things like this have been considered in the past.
Yeah, we have effectively contemplated a rate study when we've increased the maintenance fee itself based on how much we've been pulling in and what the expenses have been.
Well, I think that's where we're getting a lot of confusion, and a bunch of the emails, I would say the majority, everybody's saying, we're paying a landscape fee to have you paint my fence. Well, they don't realize that hasn't paid for that fence for years, so.
It's not their fault.
No, there's no, they had no transparency into this is where it's been. I guess if you're attending the budget meetings and digging into it, but they probably don't realize, no, that landscape fee actually hasn't covered your fence for a long time, and it's fine if you want it to, that's, you know, we can make it happen, but it's gonna come at a cost, because it hasn't been paid
And
for.
for them, all they know is their fence got painted.
Yeah.
So they don't know who was paying for it, they just knew the town was doing it. So, you know, I agree, that's part of the problem. We moved it out of the landscape fee, nobody knew it. So, you know, maybe that agreement could go away tomorrow, because we don't have an agreement with anybody anymore. However, there were commitments that were made, particularly to people who owned their houses back in the early 2000s. They bought their houses with that commitment in place. So let's look at the agreement, figure out what do we believe to be the right things based on that agreement. And hopefully our attorney can dig through it more than probably all of us have, but I've read it several times. And then really have the cost of what each one of the, you know, what do we think it's costing for sprinkler maintenance every year? What's it costing for the parks? What's it costing for the flowers? And really look at the details so that our residents understand this is not covering, this landscape fee is not covering a lot of what we committed. Because more than half of it's just going to maintain the grounds, you know, to maintain the parks and put the flower beds in. So, you know, I think we all have better information now than we had when we discussed this a year ago or a year and a half ago. I
think what's gonna happen though, like, is, I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying, Sandy. You know, however, I am certain that there was a reason for what we've done in the past and why we did it. And I think that what's probably gonna end up happening is if we go back and kind of build all the stuff back into the landscape fee that should be paid for out of the landscape fee, versus, you know, that which is supplemented by the general fund, we're gonna end up with a enormous landscape fee that will just shock people. And then we'll be like, okay, well.
and maybe that's what needs to happen.
I'd sure like to know,
No, no, no,
I want to know
that's
what.
fine.
Maybe that's what
That's
everybody
fine.
needs to
And,
know.
you know,
Doesn't
we
mean we
can
have
look
to
at it,
approve
we
it,
can
but-
look at it in a board meeting, but it would not surprise me in the least if we come back with something that's gonna be like, all right.
Well, in this fund balance that so Matt, what you and Jeff were saying earlier is that we had a fund balance, so we covered the cost of the fences. Is that what I heard?
Being
Well,
nice
that-
got us in this mess.
It's not just fences.
Or other things that were, and some of which, maybe others that were not in the landscape fee.
Yeah.
Was that a board decision? Was that a staff decision?
Well, it was,
Was it a
so
combination?
we make those type of decisions, the staff, but ultimately the budget approved by the board, so.
So it was in the budget. But
Like I said to the mayor, I'd have to go back and see what we highlighted, but we
I
go
mean,
through that.
it seems to me that if you want to take a fund balance, because we have extra money, and refund back, you know, some tax money to the residents, then the landscape fee should have been the landscape fee. And then if we had a fund balance and we wanted to return some money, then we return that money, right? And it stays, you know, rather than shuffling money
Some of
around,
that's
right?
what we were doing,
It-
because we weren't raising the fee. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, no, it does, but it's not clear, right? The landscape fee didn't go up, right? It's not like, the landscape fee should have been covering all these things, and the budget was set that you pay for this landscape fee. If we have extra money over here, then maybe the board decides to do a refund. However we want to do the refund, it might even be to all residents in some other manner, but I don't know what all we can do, but certainly the landscape fee. But I want to see that number, I really do. I want to know what that landscape fee should be based on what was committed to in this dissolution agreement, and
And then what has expanded
Yeah.
over time.
And where
right?
it is,
Because this
where it
this
is today.
2003.
No, understood, yeah, where-
Right, and so there are things that have been
They've grown,
built
we have more
subsequent.
people,
Yeah.
we have more parks, yeah,
Right.
but where should that number be? And if it's exorbitant, then we can have a discussion about it, right? Because, I mean, you know, you start talking about fees for other parts of town, and I'm sitting there going, well, okay, well, the town has, you know, provided trees and bushes on our corners of Gold Creek Drive for the last 20 years, right? And so, okay, so now do we have to start paying for that? Is that a new service? Do I have to now start paying for that service a different way? Right? So these are decisions we're going to have to, you know, really think about and do. I mean, do you increase property taxes just to cover it so it's equitable across the entire town and take away the landscape fee, right? Or do you get very specific? You know, I'm struggling, you know, I keep flip-flopping in my head about what to do with these fences, right? You're right, they're on private property. What happens if they fall down, you know? are we only responsible for painting the outside? And it's your fence, if it breaks, you have to fix it, right? So we got complaints even today from somebody that said a fence is in disrepair. I don't know if it's a fence bordering, I don't know which fence it is, but if there's a fence bordering the town property and it falls over, who, and I have a friend of mine who said, well, my understanding is you pay for the posts and we pay for the rails. I don't know where that came from, but.
I think that came from
Nowhere.
our staff,
Is that-
right? But that's how we communicated it.
Is that how we did it, posts and rails?
Yeah.
What is it?
That was opposite. They paid
Okay,
for the
well, other way
posts
around,
and-
okay. So that exists, right? I don't know if that's in writing, I don't know if that's in writing anywhere, or if it's just an assumption, but how did we become responsible for, a fence on private property that,
That was the
We don't
practice.
even require
So
you
that
to
was
have
the practice that the districts, when they were in place, were doing with residents.
okay. So did that come through with the dissolution agreement then?
It's
Or
not-
is it just something
it's not in
we
there.
always
Yeah.
said, okay?
This was only for
Scope
perimeter
creep.
to open
Right.
space. Like all
It's almost
the
Scope creep.
Yeah.
people didn't.
No, that's exactly, I mean, there's, because there's nothing in here, like in the definition of town, like, the town has streets everywhere, right? Like, does my fence, which, abuts a street, count as a town fence? And the answer is no, it never has. But my parents' fence backs up to Wildflower Park, which didn't exist in any of these agreements. So, whose fence is that?
Right. There you go.
Well, there's certainly some cleanup to do.
Right, and then there's Town 15, which on these maps is gonna be residential development. So, again,
Right. Those aren't open space, it's not open space, it just happens to be private property owned by the town.
So Leslie, you had said, I think, at one point, that there is 1 year where we don't paint any resident fences. Did I misunderstand that?
No, so rotation number 3 is pretty much all town fencing. That does include Waterford, because Waterford fences are town
It's
property.
different. So
It is different.
did we paint fences in 2023?
We paint them every year.
No, I mean, did we paint resident fences in 2023?
Last year.
No,
Okay,
we
so,
did if we did some minor repair and they needed to be painted.
so we are now, but we did in 2022.
Yes.
So we're basically in the second year of starting over again. So we are getting to the
In a
point.
4-year cycle,
In a four-year cycle.
not in a 6.
But if we did a 6-year cycle, which is what the thing agreed, we're not in a big mess right now if we didn't do fences this year or next.
Except for
And
the
that
fact that people are complaining with the quality of which the contractor did the painting because it's peeling in a lot of areas.
Some people think we stopped already, like that it's done.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, we did stop already.
And
depends on where
But
you're.
our
it
neighbor's
is
on a
getting to
4-year
the
cycle
point
anyway.
where
So
the fence will not hold the paint anymore because of the age of the fence.
Because the fences are so
Right, so
old.
then-
Well, they're rotten,
They're
and so
crumbling.
they're moist.
Which is why
They
they-
don't hold the paint.
Which is why they burn so quickly too.
Which is, that's a whole other issue we've got is, even if we paint them right now, the fences are gonna fall down. So how do we even deal with that part of it?
Right.
Because the fences they're garbage.
Yeah, my
And
question
is that our responsibility?
My question
not.
is,
No.
at 6%
No.
increase on Rock Creek homeowners for painting, 10% if we did maintenance and repair. What is it if we start budgeting in, it's 30 years, they're gonna start having to just be completely replaced, not maintained or fixed? What would the increase be to start building if we need to replace these, and most likely not with wood, but
It would
something
be-
fiber or metal?
Yeah, the cost would be so high that
Yeah.
Is
the
there
fee
like
wouldn't
a
cut.
federal
it would be
money
too-
for WUI
too-
fencing for the whole town?
I think we looked at that.
I think we
The
did.
answer was,
That
no.
was the plan.
Yeah.
We were
There's
like,
no
Yeah,
money.
so, to me, that's part of, I know we got this little bit of a scrap going between us and the Rock Creek HOA right now, but I think we have to have a serious discussion with them about the responsibility for these fences and the fact that they're 20 years old and they need to be replaced. So who's responsible for that? That is not,
Well,
that's not the town's
We
responsibility.
saw some of that with the rebuilds. Some property owners chose to install a fire-resistant type of fence.
Right.
And they paid for that cost.
So we haven't paid for any fences.
We haven't paid for
Right.
it.
Right.
But if we deem it, I mean, there also, why are we not at the point where we're saying, okay, we shouldn't be investing anymore in painting these fences because they're in terrible shape. So, should we say, okay, well, if you replace your fence because they need to be replaced, then we'll talk about it, or something along that line, because, it sounds like from what Leslie's saying, we shouldn't put one more penny of paint on those fences because they're so bad. So, I'm not just saying automatically we should return to painting them, but I think we need to look at the whole term of the agreement and how do we hold people accountable? Hey, we're just not going to invest in these fences anymore.
We paint just one side of the fence, or
We just paint one
just the
side.
outside of the fence? So the resident may or may not paint the other side of the fence, which could cause damage to the fence, which could be, if they're not keeping.
Belongs to you.
Which,
Well, so the
that,
other side, but we're. painting-
that's part of
yeah.
what we're hearing, is that it's our watering that's making the fences fall apart. Now, I don't think that's it. 20 years, wood fences are gonna fall apart. I remember my parents replacing their wood fences. So I think there's just a lot of complicating factors here, but we really need to do this study of what the agreement was and what would it cost if we were to make the landscape fee cover all the things that we supposedly agreed to.
And I think it's important that residents understand that even fences are not a town requirement. We don't require fences for
Yeah.
anybody. The HOA requires the fences. And it's the Rock Creek HOA, it's a contract that you signed that you're responsible for keeping a fence on your property because you're a member of the HOA, because you're in the HOA.
It's not
I
as
can't-
straightforward as the memo that went out.
I can't see us replacing fences. I was kind of on board with, okay, we can continue to paint the fences. The farther we keep talking about this, how far do you go? Where does the line get drawn, right? And-
I don't think town money should ever be spent on a wooden fence, buying a new
Another-
wooden
yeah.
fence, period.
But this is why we kind of brought it
Yeah.
up. So I think some people feel like we were just like Scrooges, like we are about the Christmas lights, and we just don't want to pay for it. Like, it came up because it was a matter of, what is the long game here? Like, how are we going to fix this? And so to come full circle on it, yeah, it's
Well, that's why I think, ultimately, we could do a short-term fix and make people happy, and then make this not be this board's immediate problem, and then kick the can down the road, and then.
that's why we're here.
Right, no, but I'm just saying, that's one thing that we could do. But if we wanted to actually solve this, going to the voters and saying okay, do you want to fund this in perpetuity so you don't have this get changed again? And, separately, as part of a question like that, it could be, oh, and by the way, the town board's not budgeting for, replacement of your private property. Is that, I don't know if there's a special capital fund that could be created for the purposes of, actually avoiding a special assessment from the HOA, but with that kind of thinking in mind, recognizing that these things are not gonna last forever and it's gonna cost $10 million to replace it. So, if you wanna make a permanent fund to fund maintenance, you also wanna make a permanent fund to fund the actual replacement of it when the time comes, make that necessary. But
Well, and wouldn't a related issue be is whether the fences have to be returned, do they have to continue to be 6-foot privacy fences? Maybe residents are at the point now where they, if I lived along McCaslin Boulevard, would I rather be able to see the mountains, or would I want the noise blocked out from McCaslin Boulevard? I don't know, because I don't live there, but I'm just saying, if the PD requires that you have a 6-foot privacy fence, does that also mean that, we should be looking at possibly putting a revision in the PD that doesn't require that? I don't know whether everybody still wants a 6-foot privacy fence, if you're gonna talk about replacing fences. Right now, the PD requires them to have a certain kind of fence. So,
Do we know the incremental cost difference? If you haven't maintained, theoretically, if we're maintaining your fence every 4 years, you should be maintaining your fence every 4 years. Do we know the incremental cost difference for a resident to do both sides versus one side? I mean, they're buying paint, they're hiring somebody to come in, or they're doing it themselves. There's labor involved. I guess it's double the labor, but maybe, I don't know, do we paint the tops? And where we can reach, do we just literally paint just the outside?
Just spray the
We just spray the outside of the privacy fence.
And I don't think the issue for the residents is just the incremental cost. It's the fact that they do not have easy accessibility to the outside of their fences. So you may, if you live on,
In some cases, you do.
I mean, some folks do, but not everybody has a gate that they can get to the outside of their fence. So if you live along McCaslin Boulevard, you might have to go 8 houses to be able to access the outside of your fence. So there are other issues than just the incremental cost. It's the actual accessibility to the fence.
Are we any closer to actually having a conversation with the HOA, sitting down, discussing? Because I think all of this can be solved if we actually advocate for the residents by having discussion on who does what our role is, what their role is, because doesn't it seem easy? Sit down and talk, figure it out. One would think, so I think the HOA needs to own up, sit down with us, and we can solve it.
We've
moving forward.
invited them.
I know we have, and that's my point with the HOA, is like, we have open meetings, we have open everything, they don't. We don't know what they're doing, what they're planning on going forward with. We can tell the residents to a much better extent what we're gonna do, but they might not be telling the residents that on their end. So I think we need to sit down with them until that time comes.
Well, they just send a letter out to everybody 3 times. That's got part of the story.
Yeah.
But I think you're very right, Jason. We really need to have that conversation with them because we need to be able to look at them and say, hey guys, help us figure out these fences are falling apart. Who takes responsibility for it? Not us. They're not our fences.
Well, we sent a letter to them in July asking for a sit down. I went to the meeting in August because we hadn't heard from the HOA. I spoke during public comment during the HOA meeting and I said, hey, did you get our letter? Wanted to make sure that you got it. We'd love to meet with you. And they said, what did you want to meet about? And I said, well, lots of our shared issues. I said, like what? I said, well, like fences, Marshall Fire recovery, a whole host of other issues. I said, okay. And they just kind of stared blankly at me and haven't responded. So the invitation remains open. We'd love to meet with the HOA to discuss those issues and others.
Well, as a resident, I'm happy to ask. I don't know if residents are asking. The last time I suggested residents do anything with the HOA, I think it was not received well, so I don't want to do that. But we are members of the HOA. We pay dues.
Some of us, yeah.
We're in the association, so the members of that association can certainly have some input into their response. But I will say, even just personal things about my own home asking, I don't get responses. So I don't know how to solve this issue where it's literally has the town and residents in limbo because they won't respond.
It seems like the HOA is only responding to their own propaganda where a resident writes in and the HOA is like, good job, thanks so much for doing that. That to me seems like the only, because as a resident who has the HOA, I never get a response. But it seems like on social media or to their own communications, they'll respond. So I don't know how you work with that. I mean, I would love to sit down because it's a lot easier to collaborate, like I've said before, if you're both at the table and willing to have a conversation. But unless you're blasting them on social media, they seem to not be responsive. And I don't think blasting on social media or sending out emails with, not all the information is particularly useful or productive.
Well, they're really busy making sure that Marshall Fire victims who just built their homes have to
removing
repaint their homes.
Yeah, that's important.
Well, I don't want to blast the Rock Creek HOA. I'm not exactly thrilled with them. But there are 5 members of this board who are members of the Rock Creek HOA, and we are asking to meet with you to talk about these shared concerns. Please, folks, if you're listening to this, sit down with us and let's try to figure this out.
I'm sure they're listening.
I think we can too.
All right, so I think we've covered everything that we need to cover. So staff has direction to get us some numbers on kind of what the landscape fee would look like if we adjusted the budget and actually funded it. Everything that it should be funding, and then kind of this 2-tiered approach of what it would look like to build, and after we've funded everything, on top of that, and including roping in Coal Creek Crossing and Original Town as appropriate for kind of a base level of landscape fees, and then on top of that, what an additional fee for Rock Creek, both with the option of everybody paying for the fence to resume, and then just the homes that are gonna actually have their fences painted, to see what those numbers look like. We'll consider that at a future board meeting, and then
Are you looking at, for this to be done before we get to the first reading of the 2025 budget, or is this something after? I mean, we'll get you the information next, or is this more of a 2026 type of?
I personally think 26. Like, I think the budget is what it is. We've spent an inordinate amount of time on it. We're still within the confines of the original dissolution agreement. So, I think let's do this. Let's not rush it, because there's a lot of numbers here that are going to require a lot of piecing together. Just if you go back through the history since the dissolution agreement, how much we've been spending, so everyone can see all of it. And I think it should be a
How long
thoughtful
does it
discussion
take to be
with all the data.
I think that if we think we want to take it to the voters, I mean, even though it's probably not preferred to put it in a 2025 ballot issue, because we'll get less voter turnout. If we want to actually implement this in 2026, we'd have to put it on the 2025 ballot. So let's just think about that.
I think let's take the time to do this right and understand. I'm sure there's going to be additional questions that emerge once we start looking at these numbers, and this won't be necessarily something that gets solved in one meeting. It'll be something that probably requires, because once we start talking about like bringing in groups that have never paid a landscape fee, there's going to be people that are going to be not happy with that, understandably. So, we have to figure out kind of what the right decision is with respect to the entire community as a whole, dealing with what a landscape fee should fund, and then separately on top of that, what the issue with Rock Creek and its fences is going to look like. All right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here from HOA.
And we welcome the HOA's input, but
We have plenty of dinner space available for the rest of the year.
Real quick, before we move on to the next item, I was gonna let Nick go unless the board has.
I might
Be
have,
free.
I might have questions.
Oh.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I briefed Martin on your fee question to him about admin fees, about trash. So,
Oh, okay. You had another question?
all right, thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, and we're on to item number 3, which is a review of our waste collection services bids. Bid tabs.
Oh, yeah.
From the mouse from up here. Sorry for making those of you who are not using the screen turn around.
Alexis is going to drive this one.
Yes.
All
So we are talking about the waste collection contract, and we got some really great proposals in. So just to kind of orient those who might be online who haven't heard about this, and just to kind of refresh everyone on what we're talking about, I'm going to provide a little bit of background, and then we will go through the proposals that we got. So just for background, again, the town has been providing this service since about 2008 when it assumed all those neighborhoods not in the Rock Creek HOA service area. And every 4 years since then, we have put out an RFP and rebid out this contract. So our current contract ends at the end of this year, and it's been a 4-year agreement with Waste Connections. So we currently have about 1,000 customers. And we have weekly recycling, weekly trash, and that's about $15, just under that. And then residents have the option to opt into bi-weekly composting for another $15.
Alexis, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Clarification, because
Yes.
if I recall, the original contract, the one that we have right now, is supposed to be every other week recycling, but they've just deviated from it. They've gone every week on recycling. Is that accurate?
I think we contracted for every week.
Okay.
We're every week.
Well, I know that they're doing that, but
That's-
I thought the original agreement was, okay, okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, so the one prior to that was every other
The
week.
prior, okay, all right.
But this one is every week for trash, every week for recycling, and residents can opt into compost. So if somebody is getting all 3 services, they're getting those 96-gallon carts, and they're paying just under $30 a month. Just a reminder, we adopted our sustainability action plan in 2022, and I'm putting this back up here because in terms of waste diversion, this contract has a lot of impacts. There's some explicit actions that state we should be looking at pay as you throw, we should be looking at increasing access to compost for everyone. We know that convenience is a huge factor. And in terms of the cost, these are some of our lower cost actions that are identified. And we do have this goal of 65% diversion from the landfill by 2030. We're currently at about 42%. But this contract process is really, our way if we're going to be looking at policy. This is our way that we're going to be moving the needle further because we've done a lot of that low-hanging fruit. We've really increased our education to residents, whether that's in Hello Superior, on social media, in the sustainability newsletter. We've really increased reporting requirements. We require haulers to report through ReTrack now. We've gone through all of our data. So we've kind of done the points that we can do up to this point. So this is just an important discussion around these pieces. Just wanted to call back to the resident questionnaire. So ACES was really wonderful about putting together a questionnaire for all the customers on the waste contract. In your memo packet, there's a comprehensive report of that and all of the responses, but just kind of some themes. I thought I'd pull those back again because obviously the resident input is really important. There's not one size that's going to fit all for everybody, but far and away, the most common thing we heard is that people want that flexibility. They want those options to have different cart sizes. So that can be for all sorts of different reasons. Maybe someone doesn't have room in their garage. When you have a full 96-gallon cart, it's really heavy. So, maybe a senior doesn't want to pull that down to the curb. Lots of different reasons that people said that they wanted that, but there was certainly a desire for cart size options. There's sensitivity to cost impacts. I'm really pleased with the proposals that we've gotten back. I think, it makes it a little more palatable on that front. Composting, people, some people have yard waste, some people don't. We heard mixed on that. We heard a mix of frequency. We have a pretty high level of service. It's relatively uncommon to have weekly recycling pickup. So some people really love that, and some people felt that was a little bit high. This request for information education was definitely another theme that I think I've heard from the board, but also from residents, is that people want to know what's recyclable. They want to know if, a pickup is changing. They want to know all the information. So looking at that as part of this contract has been really important. And then, there have been positive and negative mentions in terms of how people feel about current services. So some people are really happy with it. Some people feel like they received misinformation or, not there were some mentions of unhappiness with the current service as well. I also wanted to call back to TASP, that's our technical assistance service provider. I presented pretty extensively last time on all the reports that they gave us. ACES went to the board at the end of 2023 to get some extra technical assistance support for this process so we could really get the best information to make these decisions. So just want to call out a few themes from those reports. Those are all memo attachments as well. Pay as you throw is really common, so that's this volume-based pricing. It's really common regionally. Superior's not really at the cutting edge in Boulder County at this point with doing this, but it is common and it's really effective in incentivizing waste reduction. We have a memo in there. There's been some questions of how the HOAs would administer this, how this would work. HOAs have flexibility and options on how they manage that, so we can look at that in a number of different ways. As you would expect from that resident feedback, different segments of town have different waste priorities, but space constraints are common. And then what people have in terms of compost, some people just have the yard waste, some people have food waste only, and some people have both. So it's just going to vary, depending on where you live and if you have landscaping or not. And lastly, no matter kind of what path we choose forward here, the education outreach will be particularly important, especially if we decide to change things in terms of moving towards a pay-as-you-throw model. Just really want to make sure that we're looping into our residents what this means, what it will look like, etc. I'm not going to walk through this whole chart again, but just wanted to recall for people who wanted to see that we did get some information about our neighboring communities and some of what they've done. Pay-as-you-throw is really common. Slightly longer contracts, 5-year or more, is relatively common. Most people are doing bi-weekly, every other week recycling and weekly trash service, but it really varies how they've decided to approach organics collection. And residential outreach, I think more and more is becoming a core part of contracts, especially as, you know, communities are adopting policy goals related to zero waste. I put a little bit about administrative fees in there. This has come up a little bit just in terms of how other communities deal with bringing in more complicated things like pay-as-you-throw. So just wanted to provide this context. Currently, as you all know, the cost for services is a direct pass-through. So the town is not getting any of that. We just collect it as part of utility billing and pass it straight to the hauler. However, some communities have approached it by having a nominal fee in there that helps cover the cost of administrating the utility. And it ranges from $2.35 over in Louisville all the way down to 70 cents in Lafayette, although they are looking to increase that fee.
When you bring that to the board, because presumably we'll discuss that when we adopt a contract, it'd be good to know how many homes that those service, right? Because we're only talking about 1,000 homes right now, like Fort Collins is like 12,000 people, right? Like, so I'm just trying to get a scale because there's a relatively high startup cost for a staff member. Is 12,000 enough? I'm sorry. Yeah, this would be 12,000. If we're talking $1 a month, 12,000 homes versus, you know, Fort Collins probably hires, you know, a full-time head because they just have a lot more houses to deal with. So I'd like to understand what that means.
Sure.
Because if it's a step function for us and then it levels off as we bring more homes in, then it's easier to deal with.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I think this was just a response to some of the context of how other communities dealt with this.
Do we have a sense of what it would take as far as staff time and then what fee we'd have to charge for pass-through fee to cover that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we'd have to evaluate it a little bit further
Yeah,
in
we're
terms
going
of.
to talk with finance and utility billing, who handles most of it right now, and see what their time commitment is currently.
Yeah, one of the things that we have as a goal is to increase the number of people getting electronic billing for utilities because we're still like abysmally low. Like, so does this help us get there if we add on more services?
And then now we get to do the fun part, which is look at the proposals. So we received 3 bids, one from Republic, one from Waste Connections, and one from Western. And staff was evaluating those proposals based on a number of different factors. So we're of course looking at price, but also looking at those customer service pieces, looking at the track record, looking at what they can provide in terms of education and outreach, and then as well as the sustainability items. So I'm gonna go to the bid tabs here. Might be easier, I don't know. Oh, sorry, I can't make that bigger. No, it's a lot of context. You guys might have it on your tablets as well because this is a lot to walk through. Before we get into all the details, you're welcome to digest what's up there. I did want to provide a little bit more context for each hauler in terms of we did interviews with all 3 of them just to make sure that we understood what they were proposing. We understood what services they could provide. Obviously, you know, there's a lot in the proposals, but just wanted to provide a little bit of context and then happy to walk through both the pay-as-you-throw and the flat rate with the board so we can talk about those options. For Republic, we talked a lot about pay-as-you-throw because understandably this would be a new offering for Superior. They have a lot of experience overseeing pay-as-you-throw communities, including those who have gone through the transitions like Arvada or Edgewater. They're about to do Fort Collins, as well as those who just have this rate service like Lafayette and Louisville. They do pre-sort their organics, which is really great because as you all heard a couple of years ago, you know, contamination has been a really big issue with the composting stream. So they're doing a pre-sort before they bring it to A1 Organics.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really great in terms of the quality of the soil and the product that we're going to be getting. They do have an EV option available, so we can talk a little bit more about that. We're really lucky to be next to Louisville. We'd essentially be like splitting their trucks with them. Would be part of how we'd be able to get a more affordable version of doing that. And they've also invested a lot. They have a plastic polymer center in Las Vegas, and they've done a lot on the circular economy side of things. And then they have a really comprehensive set of education and outreach offerings, whether that's going to meetings with HOAs. They did a lot in Lafayette when they required all the HOAs to come under the town contractor pay a fee. They went to a lot of public meetings there. They have the ability to do a Superior branded webpage where all of our residents could go directly there. There's the number there, our rates are there. It's really clear and transparent for residents. So they provide a lot of services on that front as well. For Waste Connections, we talked to them about pay-as-you-throw as well. They have not administered any pay-as-you-throw communities either through a transition or that already have it. They did just get the contract for Broomfield right next door. So they will be starting pay-as-you-throw starting in Q2 of next year. But it's not something that they've done yet. So we would need to kind of co-figure out with them how to do outreach for what customer carts, people will choose, how to do the billing, how to communicate this change. We would have to figure that out with them. They don't do any sort of pre-sorting on their organics, so they're just bringing straight, what's coming in the carts to A1 Organics. They have diesel trucks. They are building their own recycling facility in Commerce City, so that would be something that they're about to break ground on. We don't really know exactly what that transition would look like in 2026, but they would be bringing our recyclables there instead of the Boulder County Recycling Center. And then they have not offered a web page or some of those other communications things that we put in our RFP, but they're checking to see if that's something they can provide.
Good, they do have an app.
They do have an app, yes. All three have apps.
Question, you said, just a quick question, Broomfield, are they going to single hauler as well?
They are,
With Republic, wow, okay.
with Waste Connections.
Oh, I'm sorry, Waste Connection, okay.
Yep.
Because that's also new,
Yes, it's brand, they just decided last Tuesday.
Okay.
So it's brand new.
fantastic.
Yeah, they had a couple HOAs, I think, that they
Steamrolled.
put on notice.
And then lastly, for Western, they have overseen pay-as-you-throw in Boulder, Lafayette, and Louisville, on both sides of it as well. They have some interesting service offerings in terms of they allow unlimited overflow recycling, so people can just kind of stack up their boxes. They will get out of the truck and pick those up for people. They allow a lot of overflow compost pickup with extra bags and other things. They have a 10% senior discount that they apply for anyone over 65. They have a same-day service guarantee for customer service, so they provide a pretty high level of customer service offerings. They have free Christmas tree pickup. They also have quite a bit of comprehensive education outreach offerings, including that webpage. They are pre-sorting their organics as well before they're going to A1. They have some really interesting stuff they're doing at their facility. And then they allow for unlimited cart swaps. They're really customer service based on whatever the customer wants, they will accommodate on that front.
I have a question about the senior discount, not only offered by one of them, can we ask the other ones, will they offer that? I mean, the senior discount, the Christmas tree pickup would be great in our community. I just don't know if that's possible to pick some things that we'd like to see in one over another that isn't outright offering it up front. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it gets a little tricky because we bid it out.
Well, never mind.
But in annual renewals, it's something we can bring up.
No. Maybe a testing of the waters of, would they even be open to that at an annual renewal versus, or in a 5-year contract or whatever. Okay, so just the senior discount thing here would be a great offering.
But,
But
Western's
that's not the
also,
one that.
Western's also like the most expensive.
Yeah, I would like this for that, that for
We don't
this.
save that much on that Western contract.
Yeah.
Aces has a good answer on why Western is so much higher.
3 times, pretty much, the other two. What's
Because they change out the cards.
I mean, yeah, they put a lot of effort into the customer service and flexibility, all the flexibility of options. It feels like they'll switch out your cart whenever you want, they'll do it same day. You can put all the extra recyclables.
So they charge a lot up front to give them everything they want. What a concept.
that you use once in a while?
We could do that.
Does staff have a recommendation on which you guys think would be better?
Yes, I mean, I'd say if you're taking into account all of those variables that I said before, so not just price, but also looking at the customer service, the ease of the transition to pay-as-you-throw, the sustainability offerings, the staff recommendation would be to go with Republic Services.
Quick question, so, because I know this is an open, in terms of, I guess, square footage and garages and backyards. If you pay as you throw, we've always talked about you paying based on the trash container, but, so with all these carriers, you could also get a smaller recycling and organics bin as well?
Correct, so you pay based on the cost of
Trash.
which trash cart you pick,
Yeah.
but based in this rate is you can get any size of the recycling and any size of the compost.
So,
Quick question, if you go with weekly trash, weekly recycling, and weekly organics, does that mean you have 3 trash cans?
Yeah.
3 toters?
So for all of these, you would have 3 toters, it's just the frequency of, except for the no organics, you would have 3 toters.
Okay,
could
but you
pick-
would have, I just wanted to make sure I understood that it would be 3 toters.
but they could all be 32 gallons.
But they could all be 32 gallons, which they still take up a lot of space. so.
It could be.
But you could, it
You
would
want
be
to
a
get-
third toter. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on
Correct,
that.
yes.
Okay.
So we've had some residents say that even with smaller totes, that a third tote would be a problem. So in these that would offer weekly organics, I'm assuming they would pay for the weekly organics and then opt out, but still be paying for it because it's under one big contract, is that correct?
Yeah, we would need to figure that out with the hauler. We did write that into the proposal to discuss how people could opt out. You would still be paying the same because it's just based on your trash cart. But we know that that's something that not everybody wants.
So basically, you're recommending that everybody's going to be paying for organics even if they don't want it?
Correct.
That's probably the.
Well, you're paying based on the trash service that you select. This is just an additional
$2.
benefit or,
That's $4,
right?
No,
Yeah,
$12.55
dollar
is
and
$14.30.
Essentially-
45 cents.
Instead of having, a certain segment of the population pay a disproportionate amount to make it so the composting was accessible to everybody, it's included in the price. And everybody has, food scraps and those other things, and so they could choose whether it's a fit for them or not. But it spreads it out over more people in terms of.
And actually, I think if you went every other week recyclables, every other week organic, it's cheaper than everything else to the left. Right, everyone misses that far column, actually ended up being the cheapest.
Yeah, okay,
of all.
that-
Like, even
yes.
if we mandate organics, we can go with the alternating weeks on recyclables and organics for pickup, and you're actually cheaper than if you've done, anything other,
Yeah.
anything else on
Or
the
if
sheet.
you don't.
If you don't want
Because you
organics,
don't want the third.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I did miss that third column, that it would be cheaper if you alternated.
But looking at the resident feedback, it looked like the majority wanted weekly recycle. Or did I read that wrong?
I think that's what I read too.
I mean, it was a basket. I know.
I recycle more than I have trash.
Costco's the problem.
Yeah.
you're supposed to break down your boxes.
Amazon.
Break down your boxes.
I think it's just, change is hard, right? But people adapt to it. I remember, I grew up in a place that had every other week we had recycling, and then, moved to Colorado, I was like, every week we have it? Like how much?
You're like, we made more.
Actually, no, but I mean, you get used to what.
Well, I don't even put mine out every week, so.
I don't, yeah, exactly, we don't put ours out because it's silly for the truck to stop in front of our house for, a third of the can or a quarter of the can.
As long as you don't, as long as you can pay, not that, I don't want those 3 trash cans.
I'm sorry.
You know,
have
it
to
sounds
pay.
like it doesn't impact me right now anyway, but I'm just trying to think through people that
Because
have
I know the
little
opposite
teeny
one
tiny
on this,
spaces.
Yeah, we'll just have to work with the hauler on how we coordinate that.
but- Okay.
Is there a price for the non-organics, but people could still opt in, or is that not even an option?
They did not provide us options for that this time.
Okay. And my concern with not having, in addition to the fact that the community, the majority wanted weekly recycle, because I know change is hard and people get used to it. But I think if we're trying to focus on sustainability and making sure people are recycling and doing organics, I think if you're not providing it weekly, and some people have insanely full recycle cans, then they're just gonna start tossing it, because they're like, well, I don't wanna be sitting on a mound of recyclables for the next week, so I'm just gonna throw it in my trash, because that's gonna come every week, and I don't wanna, have a trash heap in my yard.
It'd be good to get some information, because I know Louisville's gone to that weekly trash with biweekly recycling organics. Golden has too. It'd be good to know where they started and kind of how they're doing so far, because if it was a transition from weekly organics to biweekly, are they getting a bunch of complaints? Because I know when Republic started in Louisville, it's like, Rock Creek Parkway all over again. And then people adjusted, right? So it'd be great to hear how people transition, because I think there's a compelling economic argument here to go into biweekly, even though, the transition can be aggravating to some, but I think it's the right direction. And if people are opting into the 32-gallon trash can, then they'll figure out that they can crush their boxes and actually shove a lot more in the recycling bin. Michelle's taught me well.
There's also an option in here, just to point out, weekly trash, weekly recycling, every other week organics.
And you can pick any size bin for any one of those. Your price will adjust. Obviously, you don't have it all in here, but
Yes, so again, you're just paying based on your trash cart size. And so any size of recycling you pick, any size of organics you pick. So you're just, this cost here is just the trash cart size.
So
it's 32 gallon trash and then
64
96.
gallon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't affect the price.
Yeah, you just pay.
And that way they're picking up the 96 gallon every other week, so you can fit all your Costco boxes in. I mean, one thing to point out, because obviously Rock Creek HOA is not going to be part of this for a few years, but I wish I could get this, because I would save $225 a year with what I'm paying right now relative to the trash can I'm mandated to have. Because we're doing organics at $16.75 a month for organics, paying $14.50 a month for the 96 gallon mini condo, as Sandy alluded to. Yeah, it's $32 a month, right? And everything else on here is cheaper. Right. So I think I am really impressed with the feedback that you got, the responses. The absence of the Rock Creek HOA worried me, but I think this is fantastic. One question I did have on Republic with respect to the EV trucks, because it says if Rock Creek HOA goes in, the number's going to change. That means it's going to go down because there's more trucks, or is it going to go up a smaller amount because there's 2 trucks?
So essentially what it is right now, with the size of our contract, we're able to share the trucks that Louisville has.
Gotcha.
So they're not adding additional EV trucks to their fleet.
Got it.
However, if Rock Creek is folded in and the board decides that we want EVs, then we'll need to talk about that with the annual increases in terms of what that cost would be, because they would need to add additional trucks to be able to cover that.
And then remind me if I forgot. So if we opted into Republic as the staff is recommending, and I'm looking forward to hear from ACES as well, does the EV decision have to be made in year 1? Could it be made in year 3? The reason I ask is, knowing where we're going to be with Rock Creek HOA at some point, and also that EV costs are just coming down. If we defer on this decision by a little bit, does it mean we can't make the decision until year 6 of the new agreement, or can we make it somewhere in the middle of year 1 through 5?
Well, when we do the renewal, just like senior discount, we could look at add an amendment to their agreement.
On the annual re-ups? Okay.
It would be a discussion we have with them.
So, for example, if year 1 we wanted to do one of the Republic solutions without the EVs, and year 2 we wanted to bring the EVs in, that number could potentially change.
Yeah, and we could maybe put some in the agreement, the original agreement that contemplates that.
Okay. I mean, and I'm thinking about what we saw with the landscaping, right? We mandated a transition to all electric. Argus left, they came back, and they're ramping, and the technology is getting better. So, I think that's something to be said here. And Louisville right now is they're beta testing the EV trucks, so we're gonna get that learning. But yeah, this is great. It's fantastic.
Go ahead and get into that Argus.
And speaking of landscape fees,
I think it's good work. I just want to say that. Thank you.
This is our, I don't know if you want to hear from ACES, but
Let's hear from ACES.
Do you have any questions for us?
Did you bring the little bins?
I have a little bit right now.
I just want to add that remember, by diverting e-waste, plant trimmings, and yard waste out of the trash, out of the landfill, and putting it into a separate composting facility, we are helping clean our air. So we're not releasing methane. And the town of Erie in 2021 quoted 33% of their methane is coming directly from the Front Range landfill, which we are all contributing all of our food scraps to. So by diverting it out, we're not releasing methane, which is 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas for 20 years. And that adds to the ground level ozone, the chemical that we see, that brown cloud. So they're not only helping the making our landfill last longer, which is really, really important, but you're also helping clean up this air, and you know the EPA has put us on dire alert for the ground level ozone pollution we're creating. So you're having a double win by diverting those organics. And the third double win, or the triple win, trifecta, is now we have nutrient cycling. We've got those nutrients that we've picked our flowers, picked our apples, picked our tomatoes, use it, and now we're putting it back into the soil, and the farmers can buy that and keep that nutrient, that fertilizer here, instead of having to haul it and bring it from Texas, India, whatever. So keeping that nutrient cycling and that local economy is really another important variable by doing organics diversion.
Can I ask you a stupid question?
There's no stupid question.
Well, just stupid people.
Where?
I'm from Jersey, that's what.
Sorry.
I
love it when that happens.
There's no such thing as a stupid question, just a stupid person. So if we're diverting food waste, and that's going to compost versus going into a landfill, it's biodegrading and becoming soil, releasing methane. Why is there a methane reduction by sending it to compost versus sending it to a landfill?
So it's a very smart question. Because when we put the food scraps, plant trimmings, and yard waste in the landfill, it gets very squished with no oxygen. So the decomposers are anaerobic organisms, and they produce methane. When we spread it out on the field and we send it to A1 out in Kingsburg, it does it by the natural respiration decomposition of the organisms doing it, and we release carbon dioxide. Methane is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. So the other thing I didn't mention is when we put that soil amendment from A1 on the soil, it draws carbon dioxide out of the air. So it actually helps reverse the impact of climate change, because all those little microbes, all those plants are photosynthesizing once we give them that compost on the soil. So not only are we helping by not making methane, but we are drawing CO2 out of the air, because every 6 CO2s will make 1 molecule of sugar from all those plants. They need those microbes. They need that compost to do that. So you see our dry clay, you see that dehydrated soil that has no nutrients. We've stripped our topsoil. This is keeping those nutrients back and not burying them in the landfill where we can never get them back. So nutrient cycling and carbon sequestration, carbon farming is another added benefit from organics diversion out of the landfill.
Thank you.
So well explained.
Thank you. No dumb questions. Any questions for you?
The only other comment I'm going to make on this is the organics piece for people who live in townhomes that don't have yards. It makes a difference when you've got that big bin, because you're never going to put yard organics in it. So I know there may not be a solution to it, but if there was something smaller than I couldn't put 32 gallons of organics out in a year. So just if we can think, maybe there's some options going forward, particularly for people who live in multifamily communities, because we have limited space.
A lot of watermelon rinds.
Pardon?
Watermelon rinds.
I don't eat watermelon. I guess
Pumpkins.
I could lend my space to other people, but it's just you're not, when you're in a single family home, and you're in a townhouse, you don't have any yard organics, so it does make a difference.
Yeah, no, I've had the organic bin in the winter. It's got this much stuff in it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and when Western went to, or Waste Connections went to the annual, it was great, because otherwise we'd throw stuff in there in October and then we'd pick it up again until April. So luckily it was in the backyard.
I
but,
don't have a backyard.
yeah.
So, I mean, and it's even, when you're a one-person household, you know, like us seniors, it makes a difference because you won't be able to, she was looking after the seniors. You know, I'm giving her credit for looking after my peeps. But it does make a difference because we just aren't gonna fill it up. And you're not gonna let it sit there for a year because it's in your garage, it's not in your backyard. So, it's a bit of a challenge.
Community bin in places like that? I mean,
Pardon?
is there, maybe it doesn't fit into this structure, but like a way to have a community bin at like townhome, multifamily, or, you know, somewhere where you might have a
That would
spot
actually be
inside,
a
but you
great
could dump
solution
it
if you could
somewhere.
have something at the townhome community because, you know, it's in our garages. We
Aces
can't
had
put
an
it in
app,
our
you
yard.
could put 196.
Like Aces had an app so you could share
Yeah,
your.
I mean, that would work.
Right.
Like there was an app that Aces had that you could share your organic bin, because, you know, like on my street, there's 2 people with an organic bin, but not everybody's got it, so they just dump stuff in mine, and you can find out who's got an empty space in theirs.
I mean, there needs to be more creative ways to.
Like geocaching, but for-
Well, I really like the pricing that I'm seeing here. You know, I think, you know, directionally, I like the weekly trash, each other week, recycling and organics. I really like the idea of EV vehicles, so, you know, moving in the direction of Republic seems like the right move in my mind.
Which option?
The weekly trash, the last column, the weekly trash, and then each other week
Yeah.
recyclables.
Well, I'd hate to give up weekly recycling, man. I don't know. I think keeping weekly recycling for $2 more is, less than $2 more is
I would agree with that.
worthwhile. I mean, we fill our recycle bin. There are weeks we fill our recycle bin.
If we choose one of these now, can it, I mean, is that another, like the annual renewal for like, we did it weekly, but we think we're ready to go to bi-weekly, or is this a 5-year?
Yeah, it'll probably stay for the
Okay.
5-year period.
I actually really agree with Mark. I know it's a transition to go to weekly versus bi-weekly recycling. I really do want to hear from Louisville and Golden how that's been going, because they've been doing every other week recycling. Golden for a little while, Louisville for a year with Republic. So I think it's exactly like what Mark said. Yes, it fills up a lot, but you'll adapt to it, and because it's not going to get picked up for a couple weeks, you will crush all the boxes, which is an absolute must that you need to be doing for
We
recycling.
flatten every box that goes in there. I promise you, yeah.
I will tell you,
We
we
are-
flatten every
We are the
box.
best of the recyclers.
There's
have a
weeks that
box
we're
cutter.
jumping on
Electric
it
one?
to get more.
You can get it on Amazon for like $10.
Razor blade?
It just-
Yeah, that
No,
could
it's
be a
like
part
it
of
just
it. Yeah.
carves right
Oh,
through.
yeah.
You have lots of things.
It's like
you get it.
Yeah, it's true.
charges,
But we're not
has
gonna
like,
have you.
But either way, I mean, either one,
No,
weekly
I know.
recycling or bi-weekly recycling,
People who have-
I'd rather go with the cheapest,
Yes.
cheapest.
Yes,
But I'd like to,
that-
weigh that with some data across the communities that have gone in that direction. Like, because, I mean, if Golden comes back and says, oh, I wish we'd done weekly recycling because that's our #1 complaint, then that'll help us with the decision.
I just feel like between the community feedback we got, and to Bob's point, the fact that it's a very minimal price difference, to just keep it so that people have that option, so that they're not then diverting stuff to trash because they don't want to have a trash pile. Because I will say, I'm also breaking down every single box, and like I said, there are weeks that we are climbing into the trash can and jumping so that we have room for more recycle.
stick our
So
kid in the trash.
I would love to see that.
it's entertaining. It's only been a problem once.
She loves it, that's great.
All right, well, so what's where do we go from here? What's the
So
kind of
staff
step?
will start working on an agreement, level of service, if we can get direction from the board on what level of service you would like to see, because we'll need to include that in the agreement, and then bring that back to you in October for approval. Or next week. They're being optimistic, but they say maybe next week.
So the data that you collected on the trash contract, it was strictly among the folks that are currently on the contract. I just want to make sure we had a sense of that, so,
No Rock Creek,
yeah. Well, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just opened up and anybody could could go in and fill it out, but it is the current customers.
Yeah, we send it directly on postcard mailers to the customers on the current contract. We did have TASP do specific HOA outreach to augment that, and they did reach out to Rock Creek, but they declined to engage as part of this.
That's different. Oh, weird. Even not here.
So, Neil's asked for some additional information. We'll get that out to the board, and then do you want to email me directly on level of service as far as recycling and organics? Or do you want to have the discussion?
I mean, I'll be honest, based on, this is the reason why I asked you that question at the very beginning, because we were on every other week recycling. I know there were a lot of complaints, and we went to weekly recycling, but we didn't alter the contract. We just kind of absorbed it somehow. But then now we're on an all-week recycling. I'm okay to go with the third column over weekly recycling, weekly trash, every other week organics. I think we should be in the far right column, but apparently we have tried it. Maybe we figure out a way to leverage the education from Republic to get us there, because it's one fewer truck driving around per week.
I think part of it also is when we're thinking about rolling in Rock Creek down the road, it's all about what are people used to, and so if we're doing, if the town's going to be taking over the contract, there are going to be some people that are just opposed to it in general because they're happy with status quo, and if we're doing anything that's kind of like changing what they're used to, there's the potential for complaints with that versus like adding something, so like adding the composting that we've done. Okay, that's fine. Got to find a location for this extra can, but I didn't have this before, but if we only have recycling every other week as opposed to weekly, there might be some complaints about that. So I'm fine for now. We're going with column 3 right now. Every other week, organics, weekly trash, and recyclables.
And everybody who's a Rock Creek HOA resident needs to email their HOA board and point out how much cheaper it is now going to be for non-Rock Creek residents. Because Rock Creek HOA opted into a 5-year agreement.
Are we including EV? That's some other context.
I think we should.
I think we should, but we haven't discussed that, that does add to the cost.
Those are massive trucks. How many miles do they get out of those?
I think that's in line with our sustainability plan, and we should definitely do that without question.
120 miles, thank you.
I think the fact that we have
It's like I say.
Louisville right next door using them, it's a unique opportunity that we shouldn't pass up.
I think it's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
I don't like the cost. I want the cost to go down, but again, what I also want to see is Rock Creek neighborhood ditch their contract and get under this one. And we point out the EVs driving around the rest of town, and that the rest of us in Rock Creek don't get that service because the HOA decided that we would not partake. Well,
Maybe we could send out a call to action email and let people know that. Just a thought.
As long as you get the correct.
I'll
dates.
email Phyllis and see if she responds.
Oh,
it's good.
oh,
It's
she
not
has
me.
a contact.
All right, you have direction for
Yes.
the contract?
Yep.
Excellent.
Thanks to
Anything
Aces and
further?
Alexis. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
this is
Alexis
awesome.
and Aces, thank you.
Thank
Thanks, Michelle, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know Mike's listening in,
Great
and
explanation.
some others. but-
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're moving right along to item number 4. Do we need to take a break or anything? Or are we just gonna plow right ahead?
Let's get this over with.
Take a break. Take a break.
Take a break.
I mean that in a good way.
Take 5 minutes.
I am gonna, my computer's gonna die. I need to program somewhere.
Oh.
I realized We had
I'm probably gonna miss out.
Sonoma County government and cities, we had Maui County government and some cities, and then we were there. And the top thing that municipalities are dealing with, that residents are arguing about, is pickleball courts.
Oh my God.
All across the board, all of them.
Order.
Darren argued hard about not getting those things in
I was like, it doesn't matter,
We're
everywhere.
back on, we're discussing item number 4, which is discussion of our snow removal service levels. And Brandon is here.
Hey, good evening.
How are you?
Hey. So I didn't put together a presentation, but I did send a memo, and I think I covered almost everything in the memo, at least I felt like it at least. So just quickly, 23-24 recap. Obviously, that was our first year that we switched contractors to Triton Snow Removal. The first major storm we had, I know we got some complaints from the public. The contractor generally followed the contract, which had town policy in it, which we've been far exceeding. Town policy for P3 streets, and P3 streets are the streets like Riverbend, Topaz, West William Street, Original Town, Snowmass, streets like that. So the policy, the town's policy says a single drivable lane, once snowfall accumulates to a depth of 2 inches, spot treatment for ice control, and generally treated after the storm. And then P4 streets, which are cul-de-sacs streets, also some connect small residential streets like Graydon Court are P4s. Those streets are typically not plowed or treated. So obviously our prior service has exceeded those town standards in the past, and the public has come to expect that. So after that first storm, we told the contractor to go back to our previous level of service, and I think as we all acknowledged last meeting, it did improve after that. So put far fewer complaints, and the contractor basically was achieving blacktops on every street, P1 through P4 during the storm. After that. So we did evaluate, I put in here a summary of our snow removal for really the last 5 years, but comparing the last 4 years of the prior contractor and this year with Triton Snow Removal. We did observe a significant cost savings, especially with this year. We got about 78 inches of snow, which was right in the middle of the last 4 years and just above what we see historically on average in Superior. So it was a pretty average snowfall year, slightly above average. But when you compare that to what we've been paying the previous 4 years, on average, we saved about $167,000 this last season.
It's staggering.
Yeah, and that's not,
A lot of fences like this.
that's not inflation adjusted either. So obviously, if you adjust it with inflation, cost savings would be much, much higher. But that's just purely on cost. By far, our biggest cost savings was on material. This contractor spent about $110,000. And I want to note on material, that does include the contractor's cost to stack this material at the CDOT lot. So I included a chart 1, which kind of showed our cost per inch of snow, but you can see we were, there was 1 year that was lower, but on average we were significantly lower than prior snows per inch. Material usage was great. We saw significant cost savings on material usage. I think I noted 55% that we've been paying the previous 4 years on material usage. And when you look at the material applied per lane mile, last year we were at 151 pounds per lane mile. Previously we were between 257 and 427, but on average we were about 320 per lane mile. So that's still above what CDOT recommends. CDOT utilizes about 100 pounds per lane mile as their target, so we're still 50% higher than that, but significantly lower than we have been in the past. The other thing we fixed is stacking materials. So the previous contractor was charging us about 5 times what this contractor charges us to stack the material. That contractor was also charging us to stack CDOT's material, which CDOT didn't want. So we fixed all that and took all that out. The material usage, I know, has been a point of discussion quite a bit in the past. So obviously that material has impacts across the board. I highlighted some in the memo, just touching on those briefly. So vehicles is a large impact. The de-icer we use is Ice Slicer, so it's a kind of a salt chloride mix. When that gets on vehicles, it kind of sticks to it like glue, as you've probably noticed when you get home and it falls in your garage. It's very corrosive to steel. It must be regularly washed off to prevent rusting and corrosion. especially the undercarriage of vehicles. If you don't get your car washed at a car wash that does the undercarriage, you'll see significant rust on your vehicles. So that's one downgrade of material usage. Two, concrete. So the ice slicer weakens the structural integrity of the concrete surface. That results in spalling or flaking. I know some people even see this in their driveways and garages. So if the mag chloride falls off in your garage, you can start seeing that on your garage floors as well. New concrete is especially susceptible. A lot of contractors, once they do, they say, hey, if you treat this, we're going to avoid the warranty, because new concrete is really susceptible to this product. We also see a lot of damage on fixtures, especially steel or metal fixtures, streetlight poles, bridge railings, traffic signal poles. We spent a lot of money last year fixing a lot of issues. We spent $70,000 sandblasting and repainting bridge railings alone. And then we had to replace 3 streetlight poles that couldn't be rehabbed because it just corroded too far. So we do have an annual maintenance to paint and touch up and clean those. But the less material we use, the less it gets on those, that sprays onto those fixtures. Vegetation's another issue. The salt and chlorides are bad for vegetation. You'll see a lot of times, especially if you drive in Caslin, there'll be dead patches next to the asphalt. That's usually from that material. Just vegetation won't grow there. And then water quality. I mean, if the ice slicer gets in storm drains, it ultimately gets into creeks. This reduces overall water quality. It really isn't a threat to our drinking water because that's separate to streams and the animals and vegetation that uses the streams.
Does it have any corrosive effects on our water treatment facility?
I don't believe so. I mean, we do see some fire hydrants around roads that have some corrosion, but not generally.
What do our neighbors use? They don't, does everybody use
Yeah,
this?
this is the product that CDOT uses, and the municipalities around us also use this mag chloride. So mag chloride is bad, but it's not as bad as the alternative products. It's one of the safer products to use for ice removal, but it does have negative effects, especially with overuse. The real problem is if you use excess material, so it kind of clings to water and soaks it up, but if the water's not there, it'll sit there until there is water there and it'll cling to that surface. So that's what happens. That's why, I mean, you notice on your cars it's like glue almost. It won't fall off. You have to beat it off because it just almost forms a solid material. So in thinking about service levels, we reduced material usage by 55%, so that's huge. We've cut it more than half. But something else we could do is we could cut material usage down more. Most likely this would mean reducing treatment on P3, P4 streets. We could also look to reduce some treatment on our streets. I mean, we all know Superior has Superior snow removal service. Even you drive down Colton, Broomfield, or into Louisville, I mean, it's not uncommon to have an inch of snow still on the roads, whereas we have blacktops, and it's purely material usage. We just throw the material in there and that melts it, so that's why.
Brian, before you go any further, so I'm curious, how much of the material usage is also a function of the size of the storms? Like if you had 3 10-inch storms versus 5 or 8 really small storms, because you still got to get the trucks out and put like a base layer on.
Yeah.
I mean, how much of this is potentially an anomaly just because we had more smaller storms?
So we track it based on lane mile plowed. Okay. So theoretically, a bigger storm we're going to plow more, smaller storm we're going to plow less. So it should be comparable. Really cold storms, we have to apply more. So if it's like -10, -5, that's what we have to do more per lane mile to get the same effect.
I kind of have a question related to that then, and I know 22 and 23 are in the rearview mirror, but looking at the fact that was the least amount of snowfall, 42 inches, but it seems like we used a ton of material. Refresh my memory, did we have like an ice storm, or is there a reason that there was so much more material? I guess I'm just trying to wrap my mind around that yellow line where it's insanely high compared to the other years. Why was that? Do you know?
22, 23 was a very cold year. We had a lot of small storms, but also a lot of cold storms. So I think the cold was contributed. I mean, I think the bottom line is we had a contractor that really liked using material and prided themselves on blacktop, so it kind of came at any cost. But I think it was colder in 22, 23 than historical years, at least that's what I was told. It came in 22, 23.
You mentioned about it having a worse effect on new concrete.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about Rock Creek Parkway and some of the new roads that we've done. Is that the expectation there?
Yeah, that's something I have to be very cognizant of and very diligent about, and just watching that use. I mean, you got to use mag chloride to some level. It's just
Yeah.
the excess is what gets us, because it just sits there, and that's where we have issues.
I'm just thinking of the, like, if we get to a point where we're talking about lowering the service level so that it isn't not blacktop, which seems like the right thing to do, how we make sure we are communicating that to residents and the whys behind it, so, yeah. Thanks.
So when it comes to what we could do to reduce service levels, I really highlighted the material usage. We talked about treatment of residential streets. I did talk to Broomfield, Louisville. Most communities only treat neighborhood collector residential streets and cul-de-sacs if there's large storms, like 6 inches plus. So if they get a 4-inch storm, they don't even plow cul-de-sacs in most P4 streets. They never even touch them. They just wait on them. Whereas we don't. We plow, and now we drop material in those too. So reducing service levels on those P3, P4 would be a good place, a good bang for a buck, because fewer residents impacted, fewer cars impacted. And then the third item I highlighted was snow hauling services. So most communities, I said most, it might be all, they do not remove plowed snow or ice per storm. It's obviously up to a resident to remove snow, so even if it blocks your sidewalk or your driveway, it's up to the resident to remove it, whereas it's very common for us, especially in large storms, to take care of that, especially in problematic areas where it's shaded. We'll remove ice and snow. Usually our crews do that, but we do hire third-party contractors in their workload. So it's hard to determine what our cost savings would be. It would probably be gradual. I mean, we'd probably try certain things, maybe slowly reduce the material usage, but if we focused on just material use, we estimated maybe a 5 to 8% reduction. It is important to note that 56% of our costs last year was fixed costs, so that's their monthly fee, so they charge us $35,000 a month to have those pieces of equipment in Superior and available. So we pay that snow or no snow. So 56% of our cost is fixed costs. So while we can see some cost savings, we're not going to see a 30-40% cost savings based on these decisions. It'll be probably 5 to 8% range.
So at least for the budget, you assumed no change to the service level?
Yes.
Just whatever we did this year, we would continue through the life of the budget. So if we decide as a group to potentially reduce the amount of ICER or the amount of streets, there's a small or modest decrease that we would see.
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, personally, from a kind of de-ICER perspective alone, CDOT's job is managing roads. We should just be leveraging their data and not inventing how much ICER we think we should use. And if their metric is 100 tons per lane mile, or whatever the metric was, then I think we need to be on a path to getting there. I'm sorry, not 100 tons, 100 pounds. 100 pounds per lane mile. So I'd love to see us there within 2 to 3 years. Not step it down immediately, like next year, but be at the same par or at the same rate of material usage as literally the state's road management company. I don't say that CDOT does all their roads great. I think some of their roads are dismal in terms of management, but it is their job, safety. So I'd love to see us using actual data for what makes sense here, as opposed to, I want the street to look a certain color after it snows.
I would agree with that, with one caveat, that as we're looking at pulling some of that back and reducing material, or even necessarily not plowing every street, some of the streets like Kyoto, LaSalle, where it's a really aggressive angle, or you've got Hartstrong, I would want to make sure that those are being taken care of, where we're not having people sliding into cars or children or anything where, it's a little more dangerous.
I'm happy with how Triton has performed, just kind of general. So kind of defer to you, Brandon, and Triton for, what needs to be done in terms of amount of material and all that stuff. I think this is going to be one of those contracts that I think each year they're just going to better understand what the town needs to, kind of deliver acceptable roadway conditions. I mean, I want it to be safe, and I want our residents to be satisfied with the level of service that they've come to expect from us. I mean, I recognize that historically we've been using way too much material, and that's why we've had really clean roads. But I think we can get there by still saving a lot on materials. So my feeling is, I don't really want to hear resident complaints on road conditions. I think we had that one storm last year, which, started at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and it was freak, and it was heavy, and it was super fast, and it was wet. But other than that, the run-of-the-mill storms, we didn't really hear many complaints. So I think that was the only kind of storm that really caught everybody by surprise. So I'm fine with kind of performing like we did last year on the P3 and the P4 streets. I don't think they need to be, as heavily, maintained as they were in the past. So I'm fine with kind of trusting staff to make the judgment call on kind of what the level of service needs to be. If we end up having like a lot of residents just saying like this isn't going to cut it, then I'm okay kind of making an adjustment at that point. But I think we're investing a lot in our streets right now, and we need to make sure that these streets last. And if we spend $10 million reconstructing Rock Creek Parkway, and then we dump tons and tons and tons of material on it, and then it gets degraded prematurely, I think we're costing ourselves a lot of money unnecessarily that we shouldn't be doing. So.
Not to mention warranties.
Yeah.
High overuse.
I've always felt like we just did way too much. I don't know how many people live and drive only in Superior and go cross borders and other towns. I mean, we need to be prepared for snow. We need to have snow tires. We need to have the appropriate vehicles when we have snowstorms. And, I defer to your judgment, Brandon. I like how you're thinking about this. Lowering the de-icing as much as we can to protect our assets, I think is important. And Stephanie was saying these steep hills, McCaslin and some of these other places, I think need specific attention, and so that we're careful on those. But I'm fine with where Louisville and even Boulder, as crazy as that gets sometimes. So but I know we'll probably get complaints from residents from that, but spending that kind of money and doing that kind of damage, I think just people get used to it eventually. And things start talking about the good old days when we went down the blacktop, in a few years.
I do think though, one thing I wanted to just add is the north-facing streets when we have like the big snowstorms. I think there are, and we know which streets are kind of the problems. When some of that ice, when it gets compacted and you just have a glacier there, and if it doesn't get moved by, one of those skid steers or whatever, it's going to stay there until April or May.
Sagamore had a couple spots like that.
Yeah. So, I don't need it on my side of the street, but on the other side of Torrey's Peak, it's shaded and it's going to be a glacier. So I think those need to be removed.
It's a big conversation in real estate, house showings around here. Just what side of the street you're on and whether you're gonna get.
You'll never have to shovel your driveway.
And I think I'm happy with this contractor service. I know we had that first one was tough, but after that, I'm happy. I'm also glad to see that we reduced material usage quite a bit. So seeing the actual numbers and
That's fantastic.
we see a lot of improvements, especially with those assets that border streets. Another thing that's not factored in here is our cost in downtown continues to go up as more streets are brought online. So we've added several miles of streets that we're now plowing and we didn't used to plow. So that factored into that cost. We're still paying less than we did 4 years ago, so that's great. We do have a meeting with the Metro District tomorrow. They have a new contractor, so we'll meet with them to prep for the upcoming snow year. Our contractor, their contractor, Parks will be there. Make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to plowing downtown, because that's one of our more problematic areas just due to how tight everything is. So we have to do a lot of snow removal in downtown specifically.
Yeah, actually, along those lines, because what page is this? The Parks and Rec sidewalk and trails map. There's like a big disconnect. Most of the network is really connected, but then there's the sort of along promenade is not even on here. So who covers this promenade sidewalk? Is it Parks and Rec or is it Public Works, because that new road is plowed, but then there's the bike path, and there's that parallel sidewalk, and neither of those got touched for some storms, because I think it's just in that like gray area of who owns it. So as we add more sidewalks and stuff,
It's still developer.
But I think our section, I know they plow the trail along 36. Your guys do, I know they're, and the section of promenade is ours, because I saw them out there plowing that, so it's probably just the man and then.
okay. Yeah, because I know, and then there's also what does the Metro District own, because they still own Promenade up to our place, which they never touched last year, because none of those homes are occupied, but the sidewalk is being used, and that's, when you guys have that conversation, make sure they recognize that the sidewalks may get used before the homes are occupied. That's my way into downtown now.
All right.
And actually, I think I mentioned this to you before, but recommend that Triton get some stickers on the side of their truck so that their name gets out there, because I know a lot of it looked like they just bought brand new trucks at the beginning of last season, and they're just sort of like, oh, I think this must be Triton. Because I think their name needs to get out there, because I think they are doing a spectacular job.
Okay, good, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated hearing that their communication has been good with staff and CDOT. I
Yeah.
mean, that's very encouraging, that level of professionalism.
Yeah, and CDOT, when Loveland passed, they had that avalanche, CDOT had to take all their loaders up there, they used our contractor's loader and they worked that on the side, so CDOT's been very happy with this contractor. CDOT invited them to judge the snow and ice competition, so they're going to have a seat there helping judge, so they got a good relationship, which is great, because we need that CDOT facility
I have a
for
question.
material storage.
What is this?
Oh, the Snow and Ice Conference.
Do they like move things or is someone carting
Yeah,
things out of
lots of
ice?
plowing,
What
lots
is
of
this?
hauling. You should go.
Sounds thrilling.
It's next month.
Maybe we can start a kid thing to name their snow trucks this year.
Oh,
Boulder does that every year.
yes,
Yeah, I would, 100%.
that would be so much fun. I'm not excited.
It's a little bit.
Oh my gosh, that would be so
Plowing,
fun.
plow face.
Well, I mean,
We didn't get
we
space
went
in
with that
space
for a
open space.
while.
It's not dead yet, they'll repush it.
Anyway, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
He's
Thank
like,
you.
that's funny, guys, can I go home?
Thank you. Thanks, Brandon. All right, item number 5, discussion of future locations for holiday lighting.
So we determined the locations for this season, and then there was a request to put this on the agenda to begin talking about what the board would like to see as future locations, keep what we have, or look at more business-centric or main entries to the community. We also included what we spent over the last 5 years on holiday lighting. So
One question that I had for this was, did we ever pay for holiday lighting out of the landscape fund? Ever?
not that
Not
I'm
since
aware
I've
of,
been
no.
I'm pretty sure we don't want to pay for holiday lighting on Coal Creek Drive and pay a landscape.
It's always been in general fund, non-department.
Turns out there's lots of
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it obviously during the landscape fund discussion, but I mean, this to me seems like the sort of thing that should come out of the landscape fund, you know, especially if we're doing a landscape fund that is region specific, right? Where like Rock Creek wanted a lot of lights and they want fences painted and whatnot, and they're assessed a certain amount, then that's where it's getting paid at.
I thought when we had the previous discussion and Mike Foster had offered some public comment and said, where do we want to create a sense of place? And while I think it's nice to have lights in the neighborhood, it's not necessarily where we need the sense of place. I think where we need to create almost a sense of destination and bringing in, you know, not just our residents, but also people from outside of town or those retail centers. So specifically down Main Street downtown and then around the Costco Target area. Because we want people coming to Superior to shop, to walk the main street, to, you know, patronize those new businesses. I would rather spend the money there and then cut the budget to do any in neighborhoods at all. Quite honestly, and I'm sure people won't be necessarily thrilled about that, but again, as we're having these budget discussions and looking at a ballot measure to increase taxes, we need to have those kind of hard discussions on, okay, what's a want versus a need? A need is driving business. A want is coming home and seeing all the lights, which I love, but I would rather kind of push that toward our retail centers. I think that makes more sense.
And people have the option to put up lights if they want to put up lights. So.
The
In
HOA
business centers,
competition.
they're not going to.
Well, I agree, but if people want to pay for it,
Yeah.
if an area, and I don't know how you figure that out, I don't know how you determine whether Rock Creek wants to.
Well, the HOA used to pay $45,000 to the town to subsidize the lights
Yeah.
in Rock Creek.
And if we want to take that approach and put the burden on the HOA to pay us, then that's, I'm okay with that approach too. Let them communicate with their residents where they want it, let them figure that out, I guess. But then other areas of town, even Coal Creek Drive, a few people I've talked to, or it's only been 3, but they don't, it's not a big deal. I know there was a resident that cared deeply about it, but we don't have a need for the entire street to be lined with Christmas lights.
Yeah, I kind of defer like the town assets, town hall, community center, maybe the space in downtown, lining downtown or Main Street. And then if Brixmor actually wants to do anything, it'd be fantastic to work with them to do something for them. Or if it's not Brixmor, it could be Costco and Target because they are, heck, they make a little bit of money during the Christmas period. So I'd love to see some work with them. I went back and looked at the budget, and when Rock Creek zeroed out their number, we went to 55,000 for Christmas lights in 2021, and then we bumped it up to 80,000 in 22. And I think that was after Rock Creek went to zero. But it's also leading up, about 9 months after the fire. We're like, yes, we were going to do this because it's going to bring the community back together. And it was the right decision to make. But now, as everybody else who asked us to help has now run away screaming and said, I'm not going to help for a single penny, everything falls onto us. And it doesn't seem like this is a critical need for the community other than a couple of areas. And if neighborhoods or HOAs want to get together, then maybe we can share resources and do leverage our contractor for additional scope, but it's got to come out of someone else's pocket.
I heard the marketplace in downtown Superior mentioned. Are we also talking Rock Creek Village?
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Yes, that's a really good point.
Because we have a lot of
Yes.
restaurants there. Now, we don't make the money off them, obviously we do up at Costco or a Target, but we want people coming and eating and,
Absolutely.
That's a good point. That was
Don't
on my
even
list.
this area
I
right
wanted to
here.
say that in town buildings, but
yeah.
that marketplace as well and down hall and then the Superior Community Center. But basically just not neighborhoods, because I feel like that's more of a want and not a need, but driving business to the retail centers and having some around town property would be, I think, where the money should be spent.
Who was responsible for the Grasso lights when they had that light?
Caps.
Okay, so that was a separate thing. That was awesome.
It was.
But it was a space that people would go to for that light specifically.
The Caps did do that.
Yeah, that was great.
One thing though is with downtown, because again, we don't have a lot of businesses there. I do want this to be something that we tail off and a downtown business association takes it home like they do in Louisville. Because again, I'm happy to do this with a partner, like Brixmor. If they want to step up, it'd be great to do a partnership. There isn't really a partner across the street yet, but there will be, and I want that to be their thing. But is that 2027? I don't know.
So are we, I don't necessarily disagree with this approach. However, residents are not going to like this. And this, to me, strikes me as not the sort of thing that we should just let happen. Like all of a sudden, it's Christmas time, lights go up, and then all of a sudden the neighbors are like, where are all the stuff? Where's all the lights?
Well, I think that's
So,
part of the
so there needs to be some
evaluation.
communication that is gonna go out to the community that kind of explains this, and people are not gonna be happy about that either. So we just need to
Well,
be, I
maybe
think, mindful of that and prepared for it.
Maybe we include it
It's
as
kind of
part of the landscape fee discussion, because if the concern is that Rock Creek folks are gonna be paying more because we're gonna be painting fences, most of the lights we're removing are in Rock Creek. So Rock Creek folks, if you want the Christmas lights, you're gonna pay for them.
Yeah,
Because we're not putting them in Calmonte, we're not putting them in Lanterns, you're not putting them in the Summit Rock Creek, you're not putting them in Sagamore. So I think we kind of put it back on the residents to ask them.
Yeah,
They
these
want to
are-
pay, this is what it would cost to put the lights in those areas, and we put it in.
The HOA zeroed it out, they have to be accountable to put something back in to help the residents out, but, well, then Everybody should email your HOA and complain why you don't have Christmas lights. Are we watching? I hope so. Because, I mean, we can't always be on the hook for everything. We gotta balance the budget.
Especially when it's something that was their idea and then they immediately stepped away as soon as it
Exactly.
went into
Yeah, yeah.
effect. I mean, I think
Just set
to
it
your point, communication around it and transparency to say, if you want it, great, this is how much it would cost Rock Creek to do it. And then, hey, HOA, yet another discussion topic that we would love to sit down with you if you would ever be willing to have a discussion about anything that affects your residents.
Curious if your fees ever go down when they drop these services. Did you ever notice that, or does it kind of stay the same?
They didn't when the lights went away.
That's right.
I think it does, like, to Mark's point, the campaign for how this is gonna change and how it's communicated is gonna manage their expectations, so not like dropping them.
Agreed.
But it's not ludicrous, like, we're a town saying we're gonna focus on the business centers and the town spaces, and we're gonna let the residential areas do whatever they're gonna do about this. And I think, it's less what we're doing and more the campaign of how we communicate what we're doing and the why behind it. I mean, there's always gonna be somebody mad. There's always somebody mad in this town. But this particular thing, like, if you look at other municipalities, I just don't, this isn't some wild thing that we're doing to cut. I think this is just steering things in a more, I think, traditional direction of like what the government would usually cover.
It's not a question of doing something wrong or incorrectly. It's just a question of anytime that you do things differently than the way that they're currently done, there are going to be people that they don't like change, right? Like, oh my God, you restriped Rock Creek Parkway, it's different than it used to be, so therefore it's bad because they're not used to it, right? But then people get used to it.
Trash, everything.
Yeah, but initially there's going to be reluctance to accept the change or agree with the change.
Just
But-
stay off Facebook.
And so it's always easier to just continue doing what we've always been doing if the goal is to avoid, the outcry, right? But if we're looking to make a change, I mean, I'm not saying that there's necessarily like a right way or a perfect way of avoiding kind of like the onslaught of the criticism that's going to come, because it will come. But I think some communication from the outset is probably a good idea.
And this will be a year that we do bid this out, so that will help get the word out.
I like the potential, I like the idea of the fees, but I'm also like, this is one of those things that I don't think, the other stuff is part of the IGA. That makes sense to like stay in alignment with the fees. This is extra, and I feel like asking this to be rolled into like, well, do you want to pay and we'll take care of it? Is this the town taking on already limited staff and resources, another project that we could potentially really just turn over to the residents and the communities? And keeping that IGA clean with like, this is the stuff that we are obligated to provide, regardless of what changes in the community or, yeah. It's, I mean, it sounds nice and it gives them an off-ramp, but I don't want to do it.
No,
I don't want to, I just don't want to put that, like, I don't want to bring that into it, just because it feels nice.
Also, you gotta think like, yeah, Rock Creek is a large neighborhood and the HOA decided to throw this out there and then immediately backpedal, but are we gonna then reach out to every single community, Sagamore and, Original Town and every single different community and say, hey, we're offering a fee for Rock Creek to do lights. Do you want lights? Well, here's what that seems
Complicated or
intense
yeah,
for staff to
it does seem like a
manage,
lot.
when it just would be more about communication, setting expectation, and moving forward, and then that becomes the new normal, and people get used to it, and as long as we're communicating the why and being very transparent about, this is why we're pivoting this way, this is the history behind it, Rock Creek, your HOA said that, town, do you want to partner with us? Well, yeah, and then immediately backpedaled and said, well, now you can pay for all of it. I mean, that's, I can't imagine, kind of like the fence discussion, that other areas in Superior are going to be like, well, that's cool that we're paying for Rock Creek lights. I mean,
How long did Rock Creek HOA contribute?
Well, for a good number of years, they were just paying for it themselves and contracting directly with the company, whichever company they were using. And the town was just doing town hall in Coal Creek, in Grasso, Park. And then they approached us, I forget what year that was. Anyways,
Before I was.
yeah, before Leslie was in.
It was before.
That was a long time ago.
They approached us about joining together to bid it out, to maybe get their cost. And we said, yeah, that makes sense. And we would just bill them. We would contract with the company, and we would bill them, they'd pay us, but we would be responsible for managing, putting the lights up, the company that put the lights up. And then they stopped, they notified us they were gonna stop paying for it.
Well, they stepped.
And that's where you saw the drop in the budget.
Yeah, but I think that's an
Right.
important part of the history, though, that most people don't understand, that we weren't always partnering with them, that for many years, we just did our own buildings.
So when they took away their payment for the holiday lights, we reduced the scope and the number of locations, which dropped the price to 50,000, I think it was that year, but then we got a ton of complaints.
I was gonna say,
We
did
started
people
to
complain?
increase
We did.
locations back into.
Weird.
Well, I mean, I remember that conversation, and I think the board made a decision post-fire that this was the right thing to do. But I don't think we had enough discussion around, is the HOA going to come back, and what do we do going forward? It was really just 2022.
We were all trauma firebrained, all of us that year, so I'd like to just give us a mulligan on that one when
What
we
if-
made decisions.
What if we just switched, to the commercial centers, but then, permit neighborhoods to do what they want? Give them the power, where they can plug in, have them come to the town to get a, it's gonna be a pre-approved permit, but just come to get notice in any neighborhood. Because I've even seen neighborhoods that just put up their own lights, right? Whether they're an HOA or not, maybe into the entrance of their neighborhood, right? And we have places that we know we can support it. And Sagamore wants to, have everybody pitch in and throw up holiday lights or go buy a bunch of lights and let the residents put it up. We don't have to dictate how it looks. This is just really horrendous, I guess, but we could have some guidelines, and then the HOA can do it if they want to do it. Any individual neighborhood can do it where we have power available. Maybe even target those, maybe even have a map that says, hey, if you want to do it, this is how you do it, and this is where you do it. We take care of the commercial areas.
I don't know, we'd have to check with Nick on liability, if they're putting lights on
Private, yeah.
like town facilities or light poles or things like that.
Oh, yeah, agreed, but trees.
Or even,
trees and things like
there
that.
are trees. The trees belong to the town.
Right, true, yeah.
Yeah, how is the HOA handling that?
Well, then have the HOA do it, have the HOA do it before, we allowed them to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I said, maybe a permit's required or something.
And up until 2004, the districts 2 and 3 board worked with the HOA to allow them to put lights up in Rock Creek.
To tell you, right, we couldn't go down Coal Creek, do all the street poles. That would be,
This is a, communication campaign and a next year thing, right? We're moving ahead full with this.
And we'll do it early so that, because we have to bid it out and because we might be changing the locations, whether we are reducing it or adding it or however we do it, the vendor will need time to come up with that pricing if they need to buy any new display material.
and are there different designs that cost more or less?
I'm sorry?
Are there different designs that cost less?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of differential in cost. Labor's the biggest piece, so when you put lights up in the trees, the big trees are more expensive.
It takes them days to do that.
Yeah, that
It's
became very
wild.
obvious when you broke out those 4 locations, because immediately I said, oh my God, that explains why the lights are so expensive at Rock Creek Circle and Yarrow, because 90% of the display is up in the top of those trees, so you've got that intense labor cost to put those lights up there.
I do think though that we need to, like any of the communication, it needs to be early. So, because what we don't want to have happen is like the HOA be like, the Rock Creek HOA, well, we would have done lights, but like, the town jammed us like right at the
Here's
last
an
minute,
idea.
so.
In this holiday lighting, have a light that says, this is the last year.
Except for those 4 sites that we already kicked out. We're like, sorry. Please talk to the poor people who.
We will need to work with some of the retail up along Marshall because some of their electric is still not repaired yet. But if we focus on that next year, we have time to work with them, try and get that electric back up.
All right.
Scrooge's board. Yeah, I think we want to plan on getting this information out as quickly after the holiday season as we possibly can, so we can say,
Happy New Year.
hope you enjoyed it this year.
Yeah, change is coming.
Change is coming.
And reach out, to your point, to the HOA in writing so that when they say that we have been communicating and they haven't mentioned this, that we can say, here's exactly.
I'm sure some of them will watch the meeting
residents
tonight,
were
so they're gonna know.
Total disbelief that we'd even tried to talk to them. I was like, do you think we just made this up?
We didn't say we want to talk about fences, we just wanted to have a broader conversation, right? So,
He said it. He was super
Yeah, he was
clear
there.
about it.
he was there and then he was muted.
Well, I think we have to talk about
They're
the bigger
recording
issue of
meetings.
fences.
Oh, there's no proof then.
Fences, holiday lights, trash.
All right, on to item number 6, which is our other items. Bob brought up the kind of Marshall Fire cleanup items. Martin
Martin
sent
sent
an email to the board at 7:10 PM that just talked about the courtesy notice kind of process that's given regarding lot maintenance. So Matt, do you want to kind of just go in what the process is right now?
Yeah, so code enforcement has been working with impacted lots, property owners from the Marshall Fire, and those that have overgrown weeds or other issues, or their lot not being filled in, or, and we send a courtesy notice to the property owner. We do 2 re-inspections, so it takes a little bit of time. Allison and Marshall Rock, I think, were great about getting volunteers to come out and help some people with their lots, which was helpful. We've seen pretty good compliance with property owners on correcting the items that we've reached out to them about. We have one homeowner that we're going through the abatement process with, unfortunately, which means they're non-responsive, and so we'll have to have the court allow us to go on the lot and abate those code issues. And we're also looking at this issue of some lots are using their lots for dirt storage for builders, so we're looking at a way to refrain from allowing the property owners to store dirt on the property that's not related to their rebuild. So that's one of the things we're looking at.
We have a foundation in original town, it's been sitting, big hole open, foundation's there, but it's been months and months and months.
Yeah.
Is there before? 'Cause
Neighbors
I was-
next door.
I was speaking with a resident in
The
original
foundation
town
is-
that
no.
had the foundation that they were going to use, but like I wasn't able to finance it because it's kind of a hard stop once there's a foundation that title will no longer insure it, which means lenders won't lend on it. I did find a lender to, if it's the same person, was able to refer him to somebody that was able to get around that. So that might be a financing issue as far as finding a bank to finance the build.
Oh, to finish the build. Yeah, the problem is there's no fence, it's right up against another property line, they can't really do anything with that side of the
Yeah.
property, you know, they're sort of stuck as well.
We can talk to Lisa Ritchie and see maybe the
Yeah,
building inspector.
and
can go
that's
out
an
there.
individual issue,
Fence
but,
or something.
yeah, it's anywhere where there's holes or more, you know, serious situations.
Do you have a time limit on permits?
There is,
There is a time limit, and then it can be renewed.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's usually 6 months, and then potentially
So
with the.
work is progressing, the permit's active, but if there's work, no work going on, there's a time limit that they can reactivate it.
But it takes a proactive work on the part of the property owner or their contractor to keep a permit active.
Yeah.
They need to be making progress, you can't just leave it interminably without.
Sure.
But there are a couple of spots, just like you're mentioning, where there are some folks who, for whatever reason, can't move forward with getting financing or just figuring out what they're going to do next. What the town can affect through our town code, just like I think the email that I sent you earlier is what's in what the operations that we have, and then we can conduct through a compliance process. If somebody has an unsafe condition on their lot, we can address that. But if somebody has a steep drop off right where somebody would walk, that we can address. But if somebody has a slope and a hole that isn't going to necessarily cause somebody immediate bodily injury because they walk by and fall in, that's not a safety hazard. But it might be a nuisance, and it might pond water that somebody would have to address. So there are some things that we can address through the code, but we're trying, just like Matt mentioned, I'm sure that we want to try and work with people where they're at to find a way to move forward and make some incremental progress, even if they can't necessarily rebuild now or 6 months from now, but at least have a timeline for making some improvements so that their lot is safe during that interim, what we're calling an interim condition.
Yeah, and I agree, grace is important. Yeah, but safety issues are, especially when it's right next to a residence or something, just figuring out a way to.
Yeah.
It's got to go both ways. We've got to protect both
Delicate
sides.
situation.
It's help both sides when we're dealing with this, so that's all.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just folks communicating with us. If they let us know where they're at and how we can help them, even if it's a situation where they can't necessarily move forward anytime soon, we can find something to do in the interim to at least give them the space to get to where they need to get. It's the folks that we don't hear from, that's the tough part.
For the lots that are kind of like weedy and overgrown and, you know, kind of like a fire hazard, not necessarily somebody that is like abandoning the lot or just kind of dealing that, you know, just for whatever reason, they're just a little slow. We've had the cleanups in the past. Do we have anything kind of, any specific lots that are identified for kind of cleanup now? Anything that we should be thinking about as we get into the fall months? We don't want to have a bunch of overgrown, kind of dead, dying weeds that are just fire hazards.
There are a few lots that the owners, for whatever reason, have chosen not to be responsive in any way, and we're going to have to move forward with an abatement process.
Okay.
So that's the absolute last option, and we try as hard as we can to get folks to be responsive, to find somebody to go on their property and to get a weed whacker and take care of it. But there are a couple of instances that just hasn't happened, and we're going to have to go in before the end of the growing season, make sure that it happens, and then ultimately give that property owner a bill or whoever's going to take over that property from them at some point in the future.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about? Is that good enough for you?
That's good.
That's good enough? Sure. All right. Well, appreciate staff's continued efforts on this front. It's a delicate issue and balance, and I know that staff's well aware of that, right? And so we're exercising the appropriate amount of kind of patience and grace with people, while at the same time just doing what we need to do to maintain services, expectations of the community. So, all right, unless there's anything further, we can adjourn. Cool. Good work session.